Smash! Fucking morning, a man sighed, his eyes still half closed as his alarm clock crashed to the floor. His clenched fist was frozen on the bedside table where the damned object should have been. Usually, he would have gone back to sleep, convincing himself there was still time. Not this time. That didn't happen often. It should have made him think. This morning, the young man untangled himself surprisingly well from his blankets. Rising shirtless, 6 feet tall, and over 20 years old, the first thought you'd have when you saw him would have been that he was average-looking. Despite being slightly overweight, he looked good with his clothes on. Someone observant enough might perceive the outline of a few muscles, remnants of an ancient past where he was willing to work out and moderate his junk food intake. But today, his motivation was running out. His skin was pale and he had dark circles under his eyes. He played too many video games and worked daily on the computer. A little acne, not a lot, but enough to show that he was going off the rails. A brown mane, never touched by scissors, and a 2-week-old thick beard decorated all these flattering features. Fortunately, his face still had some potential. Fine, sharp traits and smoldering eyes contrasted with his lack of delicacy. From time to time, a sad melancholic glint would replace it, quickly stifled by a frown. This young man's name was Jake Wilderth. Orphaned since the age of 3, his parents had died in the fake Third World War in 2084 like many others. He was 25 years old today. Raised since then by his uncle Kalen with his cousin Anya, his uncle's daughter, his childhood had been a quiet river. Well, almost. The Wilderths were an old family, not aristocratic or bourgeois, but arrogant and demanding enough to give a hard life to their descendants. Why would you ask? No family heirloom, no historical secrets, no great cause to defend. Then what was it? Pure pride. The Wilderths all had one thing in common. They were smart. Not miraculously smart or geniuses of the century. It was actually a standard IQ of 130 or higher. Some might say that genetic didn't matter so much or that IQ was not a good measure of intelligence. Emotional intelligence was, after all, much more useful when it came to being successful in life. Yet, when it became a generality in a large family, it changed everything. When a child was limited or mentally retarded, the parents would be much more tolerant, letting them do what they wanted. There would be no requirements. When the child was exceptional, in contrast to the previous example, parents would become strict. On the one hand, they would not want their child to waste his or her talent. On the other hand, they would often unconsciously transfer their own failed dreams to them. With the Wilderths, there was a third consideration: not to embarrass themselves. If you were more successful than your cousins, aunts, or uncles, that was fine, but you couldn't be less successful. The mockery born of comparisons would nip any form of happiness in the bud. That's what happened to Jake. His uncle was benevolent and his cousin Anya protective. He grew up peacefully. Yet, whether it was because he was introverted or because the death of his first parents affected him, he had few friends. The excellent facilities at school made it easy for him to go to university, but never taught him to cram and work hard. The sheltered life created an indecisive and procrastinating mindset. He had no idea what he wanted to do with his life, as increasing pressure from other family members made him increasingly uncomfortable. Like many lonely and asocial nerds before him, he found a way out of reality by reading, binge-watching, and playing video games. It wasn't so bad. As an intelligent and logical man, he chose to link his future career to his current pleasures. He then enrolled in a university specializing in programming and informatics. Unfortunately, he soon got bored. The volume of learning was incomparable with the amount of work in high school. Even for him, it required some effort. The pleasure of playing video games and the pleasure of making them were as far apart as possible. The consequence of this was that he dropped out. He tried a few curricula such as management or cybernetics, but the boredom was still strong. He came out with a degree in cybernetics and programming, with his uncle discreetly using his circle of acquaintances to save this sinking ship of a nephew. This academic path might have seemed strange at the beginning of the 21st century, but not in the 22nd. The technology of quantum computing was mature. The limit predicted for the miniaturization of transistors by Moore's law had been solved. The performance of computers had again improved rapidly. Artificial intelligence and bioengineering had made huge advances. Nanocybernetics was also on the right track. Earth had managed to create its first colony on Mars more than 40 years ago. 3D printing was perfected, even allowing organs to be duplicated or recreated using donor cells as ink. And yes, medicine had also developed a lot. Fortunately for the people of Earth, we could still feel the ravages of the fake Third World War everywhere. Even 25 years later, after 2070, geopolitical tensions escalated. The Earth had more than 10 billion inhabitants and access to drinking water was no longer guaranteed. Global warming accelerated the melting of sea ice, leading to the disappearance underwater of many well-known coastal cities and a group of oceanic islands. Rich countries such as the United States or China adapted easily, making the necessary investments to protect key coastal cities such as New York or Shanghai. Poorer states have had to relocate part of their population inland, suffering a net loss of territory. Oil, water, precious metals or gemstones. As the world continued to drain fossil energies, their market value continued to skyrocket. Naturally, conflicts became more and more frequent. In 2084, the Third World War was about to break out. On May 14th of that same year, a terrible war did indeed break out, but it was far from what it should have been. Even today, the mystery had not yet been completely solved. To sum it up in one sentence, every major city was annihilated in a single day. Moscow, Tokyo, Paris, Washington, London. The names of every capital city one could think of had been erased from the face of the earth. No explanation was given. No adventurous war reporter crossed the military cordon that cut off civilian access to these areas. Indeed, many people had testified to seeing dazzling nuclear mushrooms blooming in most of these cities. However, many incongruities had quickly manifested themselves through millions of strange testimonies. No government could completely silence the voice of its people. The first anomaly was that all contact, whether by telephone or the internet, had been cut off a few days before the nuclear missiles were fired. Some family members, friends and lovers who made a phone call to people living or working in these big cities had simply heard a loud static noise before hanging up without being able to intervene. After communications were lost, no one came back. Even these days, the governments had not yet given a satisfying justification to the victims' relatives. Add to this the weird evidences via photos or phone videos of psychedelic rainbow light coming from these places, or the few pictures of uncanny airships. People didn't need more to speculate and go with a theory of their own. The terrorist or Third World War theories were, in fact, the less popular. The dominant one was the alien invasion, not on account of the rare peculiar ship pictures or government silence, but because an Earth government saw the light of day soon after. If you once had in your life any interest in history or politics, you then probably know that even if there was a clear loser from either side, negotiations should have taken a long time. Months, if not years, before agreeing for a consensus. Especially in the theoretical case of a Third World War in which many countries would be involved. However, it happened. The Earth Government or United Earth Government. Created in barely 4 days, every religion and power speaking out from the same voice. Understandably, this new Earth government couldn't give no response at all either. They chose a rarely seen solution in politics. Temporize. 2 years after the false Third World War, as it was called now, the stabilized government made an announcement to pacify the mobs. It was rebroadcasted so many times that Jake could recite it by heart, in spite of his young age back then. Earth citizens, what happened on the May 14th is so unprecedented that it can't be resumed in a few words. Regrettably, we can't tell you the truth of what happened right now. We are investigating at the present time, and the bit that we know is so tremendous that most people wouldn't be ready for this. In the years to come, the way we live will change, but you will put up with this. You will adapt effortlessly compared to what is to come. The day of no return will be 2 decades in the future. In about 20 years from now, something will happen on a very particular day. Even we can't say when it will happen exactly, we could be off from a few months to several years. But it will happen. Then our lives will not ever be the same. It was 22 years ago. They were 2 years off. Jake, that was now brushing his teeth, didn't know that this morning when he woke up, his life would take a turn he could never have imagined. The day everything changed. The August 16th, 2106. To listen to the next episode, contact us directly via the description below to receive lifetime access to new episodes and updates. In the past, Jake was used to having a plentiful breakfast before going to work. A bowl of milk, a nice amount of cereals, a fruit, and maybe a cup of tea or coffee. The typical French breakfast. Sugar before everything else. However, it was more than 5 years ago when he was still living at his uncle's villa. At this time, he didn't have any sense of food value. He was well-fed with nothing to worry about. What Jake didn't care about in those days was that after the false Third War, when all the notorious and big cities were bombed, there had been a genuine shortage of space and manpower. More than half of every country's population had lived in these towns and capitals. Areas within tens of kilometers radius around these places became wastelands. The inland, usually less populated and normally reserved for agriculture or pasture, became the new metropolis. Capitals and other famous cities were rebuilt, taking, for the most part, their old name with a slight nuance to flag up the transition to the new era. Paris, where his parents worked and died, was resuscitated as New Paris. It was built right in the center of France, a place with originally nothing but cows. Needless to say, it took up a lot of space. Far too much, in fact. That meant less arable lands. Thus, food abundance came to an end. The good news was that, depending on the concerned countries, the population was halved. That was something to rejoice about. Cough. Always being optimistic. Positive attitude in all situations. Should have been fine. Less space, fewer people, the winning combo. The reality was a bit different. With fear, people copulated like rabbits. In 20 years, the average couple churned out 3 to 4 babies, sometimes 5 or more. Welfare was quite generous at first for those that lost a close relative or friend, sometimes even losing their job. The false sensation of safety during the beginning of the nuclear winter made panicked people even crazier. Demography got right back to the numbers before the false World War, but food production didn't increase as fast. As a result, all food-related stuff naturally saw its prices rising sharply. For those that couldn't afford them, vegan powder blends became their new best friend. In a desire of not discarding eating pleasure, insects were also part of these Happy Meal ingredients for all those that couldn't suppress their carnivorous instincts. Junk drinks and food were still affordable, though. Anyway, no breakfast for Jake. This shit twice a day was disgusting enough. Ah yes, do not forget the iodine tablet twice a day. The radiation level was still above normal. Without medicine and nanobiotics advances, cancer would have killed a good part of the survivors remaining. He soon came out in a hurry from his studio well located in the uptown of New Paris. Well, the truth was most districts were about the same. The city was new after all and built in a short time. Other than a few exceptions, accommodations were basically all social housing within the first years. He jumped in the first cab he caught, quickly relaxing as the scenery passed by the window. The driver was like a mute, also lost in her own thoughts. A middle-aged woman with dark hair grizzled by worries and sleep deprivation. He never arrived at his working place. Just a few minutes after he got in the car, a pure white flash turned the world around him into a blinding white. A sound of screeching tire made his hair stand on end, as the taxi owner dug her heels in. Jake's head banged into the front seat as the vehicle came to a standstill. Stars whirled around him, adding new dazzling colors to the flash afterimages on his retinas. Screams from all sides were hammering his skull, stopping him from getting a grip on himself. Other sounds of pileups and car crashes didn't help to alleviate his mind. After a while, his sight came back and with it a scene of disaster. A few people were having an epileptic seizure on the sidewalk because of the sudden burst of light. One unlucky boy got one in the middle of a crosswalk. Here was how the first pileup had happened. Another driver panicked and went off-road, striking a few grandmothers getting out of the grocery store, before embedding himself in an electric pole. No need to say he was not the only one losing his composure. There were blood and overturned vehicles everywhere. truly was a dreadful sight. Then he raised his eyes where the flash came from. They immediately popped out of their sockets as what he saw was so unbelievable that he could hardly keep himself in check. A silver metallic sphere was floating in the sky. Mysterious futuristic blue lines of light roamed over its smooth and polished surface. It was also huge, gigantic enough to cover the whole of New Paris with its shade. But even more impressive, you could catch a glimpse of an even bigger sphere far higher in the sky. If his intuition was right, it was bigger than the moon. Good heavens! It was a spaceship. A fucking alien battleship. They were reliving Independence Day movie right at this moment. Rapidly, other bystanders noticed the sphere ships. A new wave of screams and shrieks resumed with greater intensity. However, it didn't last for long. The blue lines of light quickly thickened, becoming brighter and brighter. After what seemed to be an eternity, something sprang out. Millions of bat-sized silver spheres gushed out, spreading out fast toward the ground. Toward them, people didn't need more to turn around and initiate the dash of their life. Jake even saw an 80-year-old hunchback with a walking stick suddenly throw it away before sprinting like a teenager under steroids. Adrenaline could make a miracle happen. Though this old guy would surely pay the price of his feet afterward. Jake didn't run. He had never been especially courageous, but he was not cowardly either. Most of all, he was rational. These spherical drones were absurdly fast, almost breaking the sound barrier, so why run away? These machines would be on them in 10 seconds at the latest. In fact, they were even faster. Before realizing anything, a silver sphere was on him. A blue light scanned him silently. Then the same lines appeared on its surface. A black metal liquid streamed out of them, flowing toward his right arm. The liquid circled around his wrist for a while, each revolution drawing it closer to his wrist. A few seconds later, a new shiny limited Apple Watch edition, a hem alien bracelet, was occupying his right wrist. Glancing around, he saw many people that had a vacant look at their new ornament. Some fools were still in a full-speed dash, running like there was no tomorrow. They were soon caught up by the drones as well. The situation quickly settled down. People were snapping out of their fear state one by one. There were still blood and corpses all around them, but authorities could deal with that. To their greatest delights, the drones flew back to the silver sphere, that in turn soared, vanishing as abruptly as it came, like a fleeting memory. The enormous moon ship also flashed by, disappearing like a spark. It left a bad aftertaste to everyone. It was their first official encounter with extraterrestrials, a historic date, but it had already ended. It was time to go back to reality. People that had to write accident reports wrote them, those that had to call their insurance or ambulance called them. Fortunately, in the 22nd century, most vehicles were driving autonomously, and emergency procedures were almost totally automated. The few car crashes were due to passionate drivers that didn't want to give up their guilty pleasure. Most bus or cab drivers didn't even drive their own car. They were just sitting by, cashing in their customers. His phone vibrated in his shorts pocket, playing some epic tune much more pleasant than his alarm clock. Although smartphones were now powerful enough to compare to supercomputers from the beginning of the 21st century, they basically didn't change much. Waterproof, malleable like chewing gum, nice holograms, but inherently the same. He answered the call. It was his cousin, Anya. 3 weeks since they last talked. "Jake, tell me you're okay?" she said with a tremoring voice full of worry. "The number is not available now. Please try again later." "Fucking asshole," she yelled and raged. "Here I was, worrying for nothing, damned idiot. What I am supposed to do with you?" "I'm fine, thanks. I'll call in sick for today. I need to examine this thing on my wrist. I won't be able to work like this anyway." "Okay, Jake, you certainly won't be the only one taking a day off. I need to hang up. Call me if you need me. Bye." Anya calls were always like this. She would check on him and then would end the call just after. They were closer when they were young, but she had a full-time work at the Earth government that took all of her time. Today's event should have put her under even more pressure. At last, Jake called in sick without issue, then came back home. The time has finally come to discover what secret this alien bracelet was hiding. Once at home, Jake threw himself on the black leather sofa. This day at work had been short, but he was already exhausted with all the unforeseen developments. He found within himself the strength to stand up again to brew a cup of coffee. Lyophilized coffee, if that interests anyone. He was not rich, but not so poor he couldn't afford a good coffee machine. He was just lazy. Stir a teaspoon of freeze-dried coffee in hot water and it was done. Sorry, for the purists. After having swallowed a few mouthfuls and closed his eyes for a bit, he finally focused his sight on his right wrist. Upon close observation, the black liquid metal was still slowly revolving around his arm. The rotation speed had come to a crawl, but he could still feel the bracelet flowing over him, if that made sense to you. Each spinning was reducing the space between the metallic surface and his skin, making him feel more and more uncomfortable. Anxious, Jake tried to take it off by force, but the liquid bracelet violently constricted instead. This alien thing was bluntly rejecting his attempts to escape its tactile attentions. In fact, the revolving speed sharply increased in answer. Realizing that he would not succeed to get rid of the shifty thing, he took a break for a while by turning on the TV. He switched the information channel on, hoping to get a bit of fresh news after this morning's turmoil. It was barely past 9 o'clock a.m., and indeed the breaking news didn't disappoint. The Earth United Government's president had already called for a press conference as a matter of urgency. The new Earth's leader was actually a 60-year-old Russian, bald like an egg. He was sweating and panting like a 300-kilogram obese running a summer marathon with a parka. The poor guy had visibly some hard time to handle the pressure. It was more an empty title right now than a real position of power, as this hot potato of leading a planet changed country hands every year. It was one of the decisions voted when the Earth government was founded to share responsibilities and stabilize the world after the previous war. Life didn't change much after this for normal Earth citizens. The government seemed impressively united, and negotiations had gone well. The next turn would be China again, then the USA. Other rich countries could have a try to the leading role, but surprisingly no one offered their candidacy. Hopefully, the president's speech would give him some parts of the answer. Good morning or evening, dear fellow citizens. At this moment, you should all be wearing a bracelet like the one on my right wrist, he said with a strong Russian accent, showing his forearm to the camera. Don't panic, it is perfectly normal. In fact, it is a good thing. Every living creature on this planet has now such a bracelet. Can't be removed until death, so don't lose your time in vain. In a few minutes, this device will completely synchronize with your mind and body, becoming a part of yourself forever. The government has been owning a few of these things for 22 years. I can assure you they are not a danger. They can only benefit you. Now keep your calm until the integration process ends. The panic and the casualties resulting from the earlier event are regrettable, but these devices are our future. Good luck, Earth citizens. The president then dropped the micro like a damned rock star, before running away from the mad wolves of reporters that clearly needed more answers to feed their interview. No explanations about the alien spaceship were given. Not even a word. Jake was frustrated too. The government undoubtedly knew something. They were not as panicky as them, and these alien technologies were not foreign to them. You could be sure there would be some protest marches in the days coming with all the shits that comes with it. Well, at least no work for today. Deciding that it would be a waste of his time to stress about things he couldn't control, he stared at his right wrist again, waiting for the end of this supposed integration. It felt like forever, the time slowly going by second per second. At last, a strange noise rang in his head, procuring him a strange sensation of pleasure. It was like an armless person discovering the arm he lost was in fact always there. Nothing could compare to such a joy except maybe. No need to compare further. The bracelet had totally integrated his forearm. He subconsciously knew that he could control it at will, making it vanish under his skin if such was his desire. He also felt an immense presence connected to him, almost infinite. Hesitant, his curiosity finally won over his fear. Jake reached out to the mysterious existence. All of a sudden, blue light burst out of the device, flashing him again. A miraculous screen mode overlapped with his normal sight. An automated woman voice resounded in his ears. The sound came from nowhere but his head. Truly disturbing. Host Jake Wilderth, congratulations on operating the Oracle. As it is your first time encountering such technology, an explanation of the Oracle functions will be given to you. Wait. Why am I wearing this thing in the first place? Jake asked, cutting her off. Earthlings has fulfilled the conditions to be eligible for an Oracle, so you shall wear one. So that's it? That's your explanation? He said, laughing with a dry voice. Even an alien AI could treat him like a joke. Authority level insufficient. Oh, what is my authority level then? 0. Shit, I'm out. This AI was clearly fucking with him, playing him for a fool passing by. His anxiety was already gone. He wanted answers now. So what can you tell me? He asked politely. The functions of the Oracle available at your authority level. Very well. I'm listening. The Oracle system's functions currently available to you are status and guidance. Details such as AI's voice, appearance, humor sense, or information display can also be configured at any time. Take heed that the actual settings have been automatically chosen from the host's memories data. No surprise your voice was so sweet to hear. Did you say appearance? You can also appear? He said with an enlightened face. Authority level insufficient. Fuck. He swore again. Continue please. Status function will show all physical and mind data. Your information as follows: sad face attributes calculated according to a fully grown adult male. At this moment, a lot of knowledge concerning him appeared in his mind. He could consult them with a simple thought. Species: Homo sapiens, primitive humanoid species. Age: 25. Height: 180 centimeters. Weight: 87 kilograms. Health: healthy. You will soon be pre-diabetic. Stop this sugar. Your basic attributes are as follows. Note that all attributes are related to each other. Although the current settings show your status as a standard Earth RPG game, it should be noted that in human anatomy high strength, for example, can't coexist with a low constitution. A high level of strength needs fitting bones and muscle density to be sustainable. Strength: 10 points, normal male, 10 points. Strength is a compound value of different types of strength. Isometric, plyometric, eccentric, and concentric strength values from every muscle are involved in the final calculation. Two humans with the same strength value can have different muscular strength and very different builds. A world-level bodybuilder could have the same score as a world-level sprinter. The former would crush the latter in charge lifting, whereas he would have a hard time to keep up with the sprinter's speed and explosiveness. Agility: 8 points, normal male, 10 points. Agility is a compound value of reaction speed, reflexes, coordination, balance, body control, and suppleness values. Two humans with the same agility value can have very different builds. Constitution: 9 points, normal male, 10 points. Constitution is a compound value of stamina, toughness, body density, blood amount, and your immune system. Toughness can refer both to the hardness of your body or the one of your cells as well. It usually correlates with a higher body density and thus a higher mass as well. Vitality: 9 points, normal male, 10 points. The natural pendant of constitution. Vitality is a compound value of cell vitality, your metabolism, and cell repair efficiency. Can be affected by your diet. Note that vitality is different from lifespan. For example, mice have a strong vitality with a very high metabolism, but they die fast. A perfect DNA repair ability could increase your lifespan limit, but on Earth such an ability is unheard of. Intelligence: 13 points, normal male, 10 points. Intelligence is a compound value of reaction speed, memory, ability to focus, mental strength, processing speed, visualization, creativity, and many other cognitive abilities. Note down that psychological issues wouldn't necessarily be solved by a higher intelligence and could instead be exacerbated. Perception: 10 points, normal male, 10 points. Perception is a compound value of each body sense as follows: sight, hearing, sense of smell, taste, and touch. Other senses may exist but are underdeveloped among Earth humans. Jake stayed silent for a long while after digesting such an amount of information. Not because he couldn't understand these values. After all, in the 22nd century, VR technology was mature, and you could easily find a good VRMorp just by randomly choosing a game with closed eyes in the first VR game store you come across. Did we precise how Jake, the king of procrastinators, was earning his living? As the latter never arrived at work, you never figured it out. Well, he was in fact simply doing what he was best at, doing nothing. It was a bit of an exaggeration, but that was essentially true. Using his informatics and cybernetic bachelor, he managed to obtain a job in the VRGF, the Virtual Reality Games Federation. It was the reference in the matter of VR games. On these days, they were more famous than real sports and an international competition as famous as the Olympic Games or the World Cup of football in the past was held every 2 years. Virtual reality was still far from perfect. You still had to move with your real body in real life. However, with good quality gears, you could have very immersive gaming experience. A multi-directional treadmill big enough could allow you to walk, run, even jump without feeling yourself limited by a lack of space. A fitting VR suit with captors could reproduce to a certain extent the feeling of touch. A set of cameras could triangulate your position and movements in the game combined with the VR suit feedback. If you could suspend yourself with some adapted ropes, you could even reproduce flying and acrobatics in the game. As for the graphics in the 22nd century, they were flawless. If you had to choose one flaw, that would be that it was expensive. Most lower middle class could barely afford a VR helmet, not to mention the complete equipment set. That's why a new business opportunity was soon smelled by the investors. VR game arcade rooms. Most of them, those with the best facilities, belonged to the VRGF. These places generally were composed of a few tens of fully equipped VR rooms and a VR store selling any materials you might need. The VR competitions or tournaments were also hosted in these VR centers. Indeed, cheating also existed with VR games. Especially with VR games. And what Jake could say about this was that he himself was a genuine professional cheater too. No, it was not what you imagined. He truly wanted to experience VR by the rules. But even if he didn't cheat, people would continue. Take any popular battle survival FPS of the moment. The average duration game was 45 minutes. Your character could easily run 4 to 6 miles in a single game. Seen like this, modern VR games were the perfect medicine for obesity. Any fat dudes you knew playing video games all day would be beyond recognition in a few weeks. That is what allowed VR games' popularity to surge. The health and fit body enticement. By the way, you could still hear the advertising slogan, 1 hour of playing VR games a day will keep the excess weight away on every junk food-related publicity. For a time, obesity indeed withdrew, but that was until the first cheaters' arrival. A few years later, there were more cheaters than honest gamers. Only VRGF centers were considered safe. That is why the official competitions were all held there. Cheating was, to be frank, quite simple. There were a lot of content and tutorials on the web that explained everything step by step. You could hack the cameras and feed them some image loops. You could remotely control the treadmill or a humanoid robot wearing a VR suit. It was a bit costly and technical, but not impossible for the determined ones. Hence the origin of his skinny fat body. Laziness paired with being a poor loser. The irony was that he worked in such a place. He worked in one of these VRGF centers. Not the biggest ones, but there were still a few tens of employees like him. His job was to maintain the VR equipment and give advice to the customers. The perfect cushy job. So, to get back to the topic, game mechanics were as natural as breathing for him. The mind-blowing thing was the implications behind such data. How did this device recuperate all of his information? Sure, it felt like a part of his body. But there was a big difference between feeling like having an extra limb and having an alien device stuck to your arm squeezing out every little secret of yours. No need to ponder further. The Oracle AI explained. We are fused together until death does us apart. My personal interests lie in yours. You will soon fully understand this. The Oracle functions exist to help you to evolve. If you have not any questions, I will now explain the second feature of status, knowledge, and skills. Jake immediately swallowed back the words on his tongue. Damn, it really looked like a game. Did this oracle also have the ability to extract and tidy such a mass of memories? I have many questions to ask, but I will wait till the end of your explanations. He decided with a firm expression. I am delighted to hear it. I will now proceed with knowledge and skills explanation. This is the second feature of status. Every skill or mastery that the oracle system deemed proficient enough will thus be represented in your skill list. Knowledge or skill that you look favorably upon will also be displayed, even if you have almost zero knowledge about them. Here is your skill list. Another huge amount of data engulfed his mind. The discomfort soon receded, but what he saw after that almost made him throw up. His skills? Fuck yes, they were his, for sure. This wretched oracle was far too meticulous for his own good. They needed to talk about privacy after all this. Knowledge and skill masteries. Procrastination, 53,241 points. Normal human, 28 points. Grand Master proficiency. You procrastinate like no other. You can powerfully put things into perspective and postpone the urgency of every task, duty, or chore. Do I really have to explain how high the level of mastery coming from a nerd with no girlfriend like you could be? After X numbers of shameful skills, all more useless than the others. At last, actual skills and masteries he could be proud of appeared in the listing. Informatics, 76 points. Normal human, 8 points. You're not at the novice level anymore. Jake sighed. You do realize it is what my bachelor is all about, right? The AI ignored him. Cyber engineering, 51 points. Normal human, 1 point. You are not a novice anymore. Communication, 4 points. Normal human, 10 points. Being solitary for too long gave birth to social anxiousness. You can barely talk with your workmates and clients. Your body language and word choices rarely convey your true intention. You also don't have the confidence nor the oral skills needed to perform a public speech or holding a conference. Backflip, 50 points. Normal human, 0 points. Not bad. You do know some stunts to amuse the crowd. Jake chuckled seeing this skill. It was one of the rare accomplishments he was proud of. He remembered having passed entire days trying to master this move on a trampoline. To impress some friends at school, he finally succeeded to do one on hard ground. However, one failure was enough to put an end to his enthusiasm. Just once, he didn't leap with a good enough footing. As a result, he smashed himself on the secondary school playground in front of all his friends, almost breaking his neck. He was so ashamed that he had not felt any pain. It was the last time he did a backflip. Who knew that his mastery of this move was still so high? Fighting, 7 points. Normal people, 5 points. You didn't practice any martial art, but you have a ferocious side inside you. You don't play by the rules. Should a hypothetical fight break out, the groin, throat, and eyes would be your instinctive targets. You're not courageous, but don't have any fleeing instinct. Another strange skill. He didn't think he had it in him. He never fought anyone, not even bothering with his cousins that loved seizing every chance to give him some hard time. He did not have an herbivorous mindset, but he was quite rational. Should his procrastinating talent kick in, he would instantly find many reasons telling him why fighting was a bad idea. And do not forget, he was a nerd. His self-confidence was basically zero when it came to having body contact, friendly or not. All the remaining skills at the bottom were common abilities or basic knowledge everyone normally educated should have. Basic actions or specific moves that were considered mastered usually had a skill proficiency of 50. It included basic things like walking or breathing. However, some frequently used skills could have a very low level of mastery. For example, his cooking skill. Cooking, 1 point. Normal human, 4 points. You only know how to avoid starving to death. Making pasta or cooking a steak to your liking is not cooking. Or this one. Bed making, 1 point. Normal human, 5 points. Pulling up the quilts does not mean making your bed well. A well-done bed brings tidiness in your life. Success begins with a first meaningful action. If he had not realized by now that the Oracle AI had a sense of humor and a dark one at that, he could just hang himself. Now, he just had to learn what was the last function Guidance. He was burning from the desire to ask so many questions, all on the tip of his tongue. But somehow he managed to hold on. He would first hear what the Oracle AI had to say about the last available device's function. If you are ready to listen to the guidance function introduction, I will now carry on. Please do so. Jake had never been so polite, not even with his hierarchical superior at work. Anyone could tell at a glance that he was a shitty actor. Here were the 4 points in communication for you. He could not fake respect even if he wanted it. He had shifty eyes, his grimace more akin to a smirk. Lucky for him, the AI didn't care. She truly seemed to have been configured to work best with him. Her voice was always soft and mellow, even though he could perceive from time to time a vague scorn. However, every time he thought that she had thrown a barb at him, she would always take a formal tone. He could almost imagine her with an innocent baby face. The psychopath kind of course. Well, he didn't dislike this setting. Touché, he had a vicious side inside of him, but no whipping girl to let it on. Bullying an AI was still legal, and obviously he wouldn't fly off the handle from a program's joke either. The guidance function is the most important ability of the Oracle. It is what allows the Oracle wearers to accomplish their objectives, to fulfill their dreams. The Oracle is bound to the universe it has been built in. According to the concept of determinism, if you have knowledge of every parameter inside a closed system, you can predict the future of the system. The mothership flashed your solar system 1 hour ago, realigning the Earth with the previous model. Therefore, you can activate this function. A flicker of comprehension hit him suddenly. The blinding white light, he exclaimed with a slight elation. He had felt something fishy when he had been blinded, but he couldn't tell what was bothering him back then. From now on, he knew why. How such a powerful light that could travel through the entire solar system in a second did not burn his eyes to blindness. Now that he thought about it calmly, he only felt confused for less than a minute. At least he felt like it was quite short. It didn't make any sense when people could go blind for good just by watching a nuke exploding a few kilometers away without a protective pair of glasses. Subsequent to the false Third World War, quite a few cases of people losing their sight were reported. He understood what the determinist theory entailed. But for this to work, you would need a technology able to obtain every data of the chosen space at the same time. All data included every physical particle known or unknown, every electromagnetic ray or field, along with a perfect understanding of all physical laws. If unprovable concepts like the soul needed to be understood too, an impossible feat. Moreover, their solar system was not a closed space. Any random comet or asteroid could fly in and thus disrupting the Oracle calculation. The only way it could work was if the entire Milky Way at the very least was part of their closed system. Terrifying. You have guessed right. The whole of your universe is inside the prediction domain of the Oracle. Every move of matter or energy is in our grasp. Every Oracle device like the one you wear is connected to a primary Oracle which is itself linked to a higher level Oracle and so on. This way, the guidance can't be interrupted except if authority level insufficient. Oh great, it's been a while. Jake cursed, glaring daggers to the poor AI. Can't say I missed that. I will now activate the guidance function. Only 3 features are available at your current authority level: prediction, shadow guide, and coaching. A new burst of blue light overwhelmed him. Same as when he felt like the Oracle bracelet was a limb he always had. The guidance felt like a real part of him. It was like giving sight back to a blind person from birth, or seeing new colors for the first time. A marvelous epiphany. He knew straight away how the prediction and shadow guide functionalities worked. Even a 3-month-old baby could use them instinctively. Basically, what you wished for, the prediction ability would tell you the most efficient way to grant it. The more precise the wish, the more specific would be the divination. It was synced with his mind at all time, anticipating his desires and moves to show him the right path. There could be many paths depending on the specificity of his wishes, but the Oracle would only show the perfect one. Nevertheless, prediction couldn't answer any questions. You couldn't ask him things like how will be the weather tomorrow, or what is insert any name of your choice doing right now. It could only predict how to best accomplish or obtain what you were yearning for at the moment. It implied an action, a movement. If you asked how to get something unreachable, you would only get silence. Despite this restriction, the predicting possibilities were broad. There was absolutely no issue to get a limpid answer when it came to wishes like how to become the new Earth's president, or how to make my favorite celebrity fall in love with me in the shortest time. Surprisingly, when Jake expressed these kinds of fantasy-like wishes, he got valid paths. He could not see the whole process, but he could see the next few steps. It was a precaution to protect his brain from short-circuiting and overheating. He couldn't access every little detail, but he could know when a path needed to do some ruthless actions to stride through it till the end, like killing, torturing, and other immoral things. He immediately filtered these dark paths. From now on, all the predictions would be politically correct, haha. He could still get under the skirts of any actresses, though. Should he follow the right plan, of course. There was still one thing bothering him, petrifying him. Everyone had such an oracle bracelet. The implications could escalate far further than anyone could imagine. Take a famous actor or actress, for example. What if 1 million fans at the same time tried to follow a path to seduce them? Were their paths even doable? Maybe they were, but the real success rate would certainly be zero. The other side of the coin was that you couldn't know when you were part of the path of someone else. You could easily become a stepping stone, or yourself fall in love thinking it was love at first sight, when in fact everything was planned. All these flowery words that made your heart beat so fast. All these compliments right on point. All these adorable attentions. Just a perfectly executed plan, step by step, following the plotline that had been written for you. You could retort that, especially if you were a pretty girl, that you wouldn't be charmed by any boy trying to get you into his setup. Sorry to bring you back to Earth, you would. If there was a path, of course. This wish-fulfilling ability had almost no limit. Even if you judged yourself as a straight heterosexual or only liked blonde skinny women, the determined one would get you if you were not cautious enough. However, do remember that it would only make the paths harder to follow. It didn't mean there wouldn't be any. Was it unfair? Or against the principle of free will? Not really. When a poor, ugly introvert boy loved a girl so much that he wanted to kill himself because of the pain while she flirted with the handsome guy of the class, was it fair? Of course not. Fairness was the key word of the oracle. You could get anything as long as you were ready to put in the effort. If you were seduced or stepped on by any random dude, you could only curse your bad luck. After all, you had an oracle too. You could even wish something like, how can I protect myself or avoid these predators trying to get laid? If such was your desire, the oracle would give you a full-time path to follow in order to never meet them. The oracle devices were all linked between them. They would adapt their paths in real time, taking account of every change. Interesting fact, the paths would always be doable for you, but the path already knew from the very start if you would effectively succeed. When they were giving the predictions, they would naturally not forget the other oracle's predictions. Thereby, the path was always true at the prediction time, but it would naturally adjust depending on how well you could execute it. Jake could already picture in his head the waves of chaos that would engulf their world soon enough. Just imagine serial killers using the oracle predicting ability to avoid the policeman's pursuit. That would be a catastrophe. So what was the shadow guide? Simple. Prediction was giving the plan, the shadow guide showed you how to follow it. It was a shadow-like version of you. It would do the movements you needed to do to complete a path just a bit before you had to do them. Sometimes a plan could be very complex, requiring very on-point body language or facial expression. In these cases, just having a prediction with the steps to follow was not enough. A guide was needed. It would perform each step of the path perfectly in front of you. Of course, only you could see him. It was like a ghost. If you needed to make a specific grimace, a picture in your mind of the expression to adopt would be shown. If the shadow guide was set to show you the moves to ahead in the future, you took the risk of having the plan changing meantime, drastically increasing the risk of failure. Thus, the more reactive you were, the closer to the present could be the shadow guide. Your chances of success would improve, but only if you could react in time and adequately. Now, there was only one feature to discover: coaching. I will now introduce coaching, the last feature of guidance. the Oracle AI declared solemnly. By now, many questions were piling up in Jake's mind. His legs were twitching on the sofa and his head wobbled back and forth. That was what happened when he was slowly losing his cool. A strong impulse of impatience was tickling his self-control, making it harder and harder to ignore. However, he knew somehow, because of their mind link perhaps, that the AI didn't want to be interrupted. He had a hard time believing that the personality of his Oracle AI was the fruit of his own mind, configured to make their relationship the most ideal and smooth. When he tried to reminisce what was the perfect woman in his dreams, he couldn't help but admit that both of them had one common point: their voice. But that was it. He was not a submissive person. Introverted, uncommunicative, he was. However, although he had not yet decided what kind of woman he liked, he was pretty sure he wouldn't want her to ignore him like she had already a few times. He didn't modify the AI settings, though. Maybe it was his legendary laziness that was tricking his mind. Or else, he consciously didn't know that he needed such a woman around him. That was even creepier, understood this way. In this case, it would mean that he had absolutely no secret garden to protect his most shameful secrets. Coaching is one of the most useful functions of the Oracle. It will accompany you for every decision you take. Every opportunity, every chance, the coach will help you to weigh the pros and cons. It can be turned on or off at will, but do accept that it can't be totally deactivated. Coaching is the Oracle feature of guidance that will lead you to meaningful choices, allowing you to become a better version of yourself. If prediction and shadow guide are wish-fulfilling abilities, which only exist to assist your will, coaching has for purpose to help you to evolve further. It will display in an understandable way the possible rewards and punishments normally following your decisions, should you perform them until the end. This way, it gives you a better understanding of your choices' implications. However, that is only potential rewards or punishments. You could badly perform or change your mind midway. Even when you're walking along a path, the potential rewards displayed would only be under the assumption that you perfectly accomplish it. Otherwise, you would only obtain a fraction of the full rewards or, if you completely failed, probably nothing but the punishments. Do consider the weight of your decisions before flinging yourself into a dead end. As aforementioned, it can be turned off. Though not completely. The coach will always show itself when there is a key opportunity for you. These opportunities will always be in agreement with what you truly seek deep inside yourself. Whether it is love, wealth, power, recognition, or something else you truly desire, the coach will always highlight for you such opportunities when they manifest. I will now activate the coaching feature. A buzzing sound splitting his head combined with the usual mass of blue light, to which he was slowly getting used to. A new wave of information assaulted his mind, shedding light on his ignorance. Once again, he instantly knew how to operate coaching. With a thought, he turned on the coach. Nothing happened. However, it did not mean that nothing changed. He tried the same predictions as before, like how to seduce an actress of his choice in the shortest time. He chose one from an A-list, Sarah Olsen. Not a woman to his taste, but an unreachable one. The typical 40-ish-year-old famous actress, with a successful career, a loving husband and 3 children. Logically, an impossible feat, but prediction still worked. The path still existed, though there was now the coach's pinch of salt complementing the latter. Rewards. Seducing Sarah Olsen. Communication skill plus 24. Acting skill plus 76. Etiquette skill plus 27. Self-esteem plus 88. List of skills improving. Basic attribute: strength plus 1, agility plus 2, constitution plus 1, intelligence plus 0.5. More data available if needed. Fame plus 375. Punishment: attempts on your life. Death 51 hours after succeeding the path if tried as it is. Getting married, raising her 3 children as a house husband. Quarrels and divorce as soon as you stop following the path. Infamy. Plus 648 ex-husband's fans will want your death, together with all fans of Sarah Hilton shipping the original couple. Risks. Life imprisonment, wounds, death, losing your job. Probability of success, low. Probability of failure very high. He took a deep breath. He was already sweating profusely, shivers up his spine when he got to the punishment part. If he was to blindly throw himself into this path, he could as well shoot himself a bullet in the head right now. The result would be the same. He promised himself to never turn off the coaching ability. He liked having the chills from time to time, but he would never play with his life. As an optimistic person, Jake would rather focus on the rewards. It really looks like a game. He couldn't help thinking the Oracle device had enticing game mechanics. The only difference was that these rewards were not quest rewards, but the logical consequences of walking through a path until the very end. There was no checkpoint or difficulty level. He couldn't know all the steps from a path, but the coach was giving him some clues. The first clue was his skills and basic attributes improvement. It was telling him that this path would take quite a long time to finish. From the first steps that he could already see, he would have to follow harsh training to get a physique to the taste of Miss Hilton. Simultaneously, he would have to take some acting lessons at the theater and learning quite a few things. At the very least, he would need a few months. To be honest, he could get the same rewards minus Sarah Hilton just by doing the preparation steps. There probably were shorter paths to select, requiring killing or blackmailing maybe. However, he would never try them. On the one hand, he was not a criminal, and on the other hand, there was no escape with the Oracle. Policemen had Oracle bracelets too. They could easily wish, how can I catch the culprit in the soonest time? Then they would never lose your location whatever you try, the same way a compass would always point out the north. Do you have any questions? The Oracle I asked with the same cute voice. No disdain was hidden in it for once. He had many of them in fact, but he controlled himself. He would have all the time to ask her everything he craved knowing. First, he would ask her name. He could not call her Oracle AI forever. That would be awkward. My name is She. She answered gravely as if her name had a deep meaning for her. Damn, it was supposed to be a simple AI? My ass. Configured to be best suited for him? It was a real person. He was doubting it before, but the name confirmed it. Not even in his wildest fantasies had he dreamt of such a short foreign name. Nice to meet you, She. Any surname? Just She. I see where you are coming, so I will spare you wasting your time. Your authority level is insufficient. Us AI are all interchangeable pawns. As authentic as I can seem, my actions are restricted by the Oracle. You are always saying that my authority level is insufficient. Then how can I raise it? That was the answer he was burning for. By making good use of the Oracle. The coach will show you the way if you know how to interpret his advice. Become a better version of yourself. That is the only way to figure out what lies beyond your small world. If you perform repeatedly above your normal self, eventually your authority level will be promoted. Jake got goosebumps for a long time after She's final declaration. He felt the adrenaline rush flowing his bloodstream, making his heart pumping stronger and faster. If you were proactive, confident, and successful in life, you couldn't understand how a disillusioned introvert with a high IQ felt on a day-to-day basis. He was too perfectionist, too scared of being rejected or failing anything he could undertake. He was also too smart, too down-to-earth to attempt anything he wasn't 100% sure to accomplish. His life was basically riddled with doubts. This Oracle system was palliating all of this. Fundamentally, his life didn't change yet. But now, doubts had been replaced by certitudes. From now on, he would never lose his path. Jake had so many questions to which he wanted the answers, but at the same time, he was so afraid to hear them. He couldn't help thinking there was something wrong. How could such benevolent aliens offer to every human a device that was technologically so many years ahead in the future? It didn't make any sense. No gift came for free. She was ceaselessly invoking his insufficient authority to deny his right to the truth. She was obviously hiding an ominous secret that couldn't be revealed at any cost. To understand what was the purpose of these Oracle bracelets, he had to think outside of the box. What was the direct effect of such a gift in the long run? For one person, it was a blessing, but at the planet scale, the implications were totally Ding-dong. Before he could get distressed any further, the ringing of a doorbell resounded loud and clear in his living room. His doorbell. He wasn't waiting for anyone. At this time of the day, he was supposed to be at work. No one had any duplicate key, not even his cousin. As a proud shut-in, he wouldn't give any spare key to anyone, subject to be surprised at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing. In addition, he didn't trust anyone, not even himself. Jake stumbled toward the door with a wary face. Thinking about the tumult that was sure to happen, he finally chickened out, running back to get a knife in the kitchen. He then walked prudently on tiptoe until the front door. He then sneaked a peek behind the peephole. Nobody. Upset, he walked back to the living room, collapsing into his sofa. It was far too much stress in one morning. But then the doorbell rang again, twice in a row. Ding dong, ding dong. He sat up abruptly, his eyes wholly open. This time, no precaution was taken. He rushed to the front door and slammed it open. Before him, to the left, to the right, still nobody. When he was firmly convinced that the electronic bell was buggy, his peripheral sight caught a movement. A black mass of hair. He looked down at his feet. One wretched man and one wretched cat glared at each other for the first time. The first duel of stares of a long series. After an undetermined amount of time, the stray cat looked away, quickly charging inside the studio. "What the hell is this fucking cat doing?" He yelled and raged, running after the feline. This situation was ridiculous. A stray cat rang his doorbell, waiting for Jake to open the door. Had his life become a joke for good? Even alley cats could creep into his condo without showing him the slightest respect. Soon, the stray cat was scratching his claws on his leather sofa, making him cry blood tears. "H, get the fuck out of here." He screamed at the cat, stomping and making noise in order to stimulate his fleeing instincts. Unfortunately, it was not a stray cat for nothing. It had his fair share of interactions with other humans, and he knew how to distinguish real hostility from helplessness. Jake threw in the sponge soon after. Resigning himself, he focused on the stray cat appearance. It was a black Himalayan Persian cat. Long hair, short legs, a red nose flat as if it had been punched at birth. He cast a quick glance below. It was a male, no doubt about this. No girl would be so tousled and dirty. Although it would be an absurdly cute ball of fur after a good bath, it still had nasty yellow eyes with vertical slits, preventing any compassionate feelings to kick in. Should he just catch him in his arms with force and throw him out? Or perhaps he should try to compromise and give him something to eat. He didn't have any cat kibble, but he could still give him a can of tuna or something of that kind. He went back into the kitchen, finally putting his knife down into its drawer. He was spending a good part of his money on junk food deliveries, so he had almost no real food into his kitchen storage space. Even so, he still found a few cans of tuna at the bottom of one of the cupboards. He opened it, poured the content into a small plate, and filled a bowl with water. He then set them down on the floor, just beside the front door. The perfect plan. The black ball of fur was already licking his lips when he uncapped the can of tuna. At last, when his long-awaited meal touched the floor, it galloped with his short paws toward the food. Staring at the cat engulfing the food as if there was no tomorrow, he finally relaxed. He had noticed the little black ring at his front right leg. An oracle device. He reminisced the Earth President's speech an hour ago. He had mentioned every living being when talking about the oracle bracelet. It was not a mistake. While the cat was devouring his meal, doing unexplainable crunching noises, "Nothing crispy in tuna," Jake interrogated she. "How does the oracle work for animals?" he asked with a puzzled expression. "You can't expect them to read the status screen, right? It is very simple," she answered with a steady voice. "Even for you, whether it is status, prediction, shadow guide, or coaching, they are always displayed in the most understandable way. A logical math-oriented person will see numbers or percentage. A younger child would read or hear simple words instead, like good or very good. A baby would have a feeling instead of a value, but some functions would be locked to avoid him to fry his brain. Animals with low intelligence enter in the same category as human babies. Depending on their privileged way to communicate, it will use pictures, smells, or intents to point out the right direction or solution to them. However, most animals will make very limited use of their oracle. Cats, for example, often see new cats as enemies or mating partners. They officially don't succeed the mirror test that consists to recognize yourself in the mirror. As a result, they won't accept the shadow guide help and would hiss or attack it. For them, this fetch is just another cat that doesn't have anything in common with them. After a few days or weeks, with the oracle help like smells, pheromones, and other comforting tricks, the cat will accept its shadow guide and starts to improve. This black cat is an exception. Jake, that was listening to she while watching the stray cat eating, frowned after hearing her. Pets were not as popular as before since the False Third War. Cat and dog's kibble were almost as expensive as meat. In a world where most people couldn't even afford to buy any of them, it had become a luxury. Otherwise, how could a Persian cat barely survive in the streets? You mean he had used the oracle to find my home because he was hungry? He asked with an undisguised surprise. Certainly. If not, that would be a genius cat. Though, considering he came just a little time after you all received your oracle device, it is unlikely. Can you have access to his oracle data? I can, but with your authority level you will have to put your bracelets in contact. Alright, let's try this while he is busy having his fill, he said excitedly. Jake walked with caution toward the cat for nothing, as he was royally ignored. He easily made contact with his right front paw black ring, linking their oracles in a blink. Species, Himalayan Persian cat. Age 2 years. Weight, 4.5 kilograms. The black cat had negligible basic attributes and was underfed. He had a few skills fitting of a cat like clawing, hissing, meowing, self-cleaning, purring, and other typical cat's habits. He was also good at digging and swimming. Not the typical skill set you would expect from an interior pet. After a while, the stray cat had licked clean his plate of tuna and had now a sad look that was saying he would not have refused a little extra. However, it was time for him to live. Jake had neither the time nor the means to keep him. Even if he had a bachelor after the False World War, the salaries were low. His paycheck was $2,000 per month, but fresh food like fruit, meat, fish, or vegetables were 10 times more expensive than the early 21st century. So, like many poor people before him, he lived off cheap vegan protein blend and junk food to keep his chin up. Jake opened the door, ready to take the cat in his arm to bring it outside. As if having felt his intention, the black cat had a distressed face for an instant, but soon after he seemed to liven up again. The ball of fur pulled out an unidentifiable object under his welcome mat, then pushed it toward him with a loyal expression. Curious, Jake reached down to the object. It was a creased piece of paper having been soaked in cat spit. It was wet and cold, looking good for the trash bin. However, when he finished unfolding the paper, his face changed. $500. How is this possible? He exclaimed, puffing loudly. Did the oracle make him do this? Without a doubt, she said with what he imagined to be a very lackadaisical face. But how? There is a difference between ringing a doorbell and discovering some bills, to bring them back to me. Not really, she refuted without the slightest hesitation. For this cat, it was probably coming all down to, I want to be safe, I'm hungry, or, I want to be taken care of. It doesn't need to understand why it does these things, as long as it understands that it has to do them to get what it wants. It is still surprising that it has tolerated his double shadow guide so fast. Lions learn quite fast when they're imitating another one, but they naturally form prides with up to 20 lioness and cubs. They work as a social group. Cats are rarely friendly or cooperative, especially with cats outside their parents, brothers, and sisters. Its intelligence for a cat is quite high. Jake rolled down his eyes. He had seen the intelligence attribute of this stray cat. Nothing to strut about. Intelligence, 3 points. Compared to a human, he would probably be considered as deeply retarded. You are wrong. She refuted him again. Cat and human brains have a different structure. If a cat is less intelligent than the average human, they also have aspects in which they are better. Like, for example, picking different smells or body balance. What you have to look at is its intelligence compared to a normal cat. He has about 3 points. According to my data, the average cat has only 2. Do I have to explain to you the difference between a human with 100 IQ and another with 150? Thanks, but no thanks. He grunted, not enjoying the whiplash of sarcasm. Indeed, viewed from this perspective, this cat was one hell of a genius. You could probably teach him quite a few circus tricks even before the Oracle device's appearance. Anyway, he earned $500 today. All his previous anxiety was gone, replaced by blissful joy. He finally felt moved by this black cat. All right, you can stay here for the time being. I'll consider you paid your rent for this month. He nodded to the cat. He didn't know if the cat understood him, but its ears that were down straightened up again. So how should I call you? Any idea, she? He consulted the Oracle AI. With her database, she should at least have a few ideas to suggest. Authority level insufficient. I can't make a decision in your place. She refused to help. However, I suggest to choose a name that fits his nature, behavior, or physical characteristics. It would make his name more impactful. All right, I have one perfect name for him then. He was doing crunching noises like crazy while eating tuna, so I think Crunch will be a perfect name. The name has been accepted and recorded by the cat's oracle. After a while, he will associate Crunch to himself. Crunch has also been added in your Oracle status as your pet. It will allow you to check his information at any time. Do note that Crunch can also register you as his pet. There is no hierarchy between species for the Oracle. Only authority levels. You should be glad that it is not intelligent enough yet to reverse the contract between both of you. What contract? He rose to her words with a scowl. Nothing you have to worry about for now. It will maybe become relevant in the future. It is beneficial for you anyway. Okay, I don't care anymore. I'll take it easy for today. But now that I have a new guest, I guess I should go shopping a little bit to the supermarket. There it is. How I wasted my day off at the grocery store. He sighed. Let's do it fast. The weather was scorching today. Full summer combined to global warming had made the climate become harsher than ever. What was once a temperate climate had turned into a tropical one. To make it simple, it was either scorching or raining buckets. Jake slipped a pair of sneakers on, then got out as he was, clothed plainly. A white t-shirt and cheap jeans. Except for his new black and shiny bracelet, there were no distinctive signs. No tattoos, no piercings. His unkempt hair that needed a good cut could perhaps be considered as such. Now he had to decide what to do about this cat. Let him inside his home alone, or take him with him to the supermarket. In the end, the cat chose for him. As soon as he headed for the front door, Crunch followed him like a faithful dog. After all, it was originally a stray cat. The street was his previous home. He wished for how to finish his shopping in the shortest time, and prediction quickly gave a result. A fetch of himself appeared, guiding him efficiently. Coaching gave him a quick report of the expected risks and rewards, and thankfully everything was fine. That should be an easy matter. It was supposed to be. Jake hurtled down the stairway leading to the street level. He lived on the 4th floor. A bulletproof glazed door prevented access to the inside of the building for the non-residents. He just realized that the cat also somehow had to pass the entrance before climbing the stairs to his front door. He wouldn't even be surprised if the cat had used the elevator. Although the temperature was near 40 degrees Celsius, the sky was blue, with no clouds on the horizon. The supermarket was a bit less of 10 minutes away on foot, so he took the decision to walk. The shadow guide that was waving to a cab immediately adjusted to Jake's change of mind. Not even 3 minutes after leaving his apartment block, Jake became painfully aware of how empty were the streets. The alien ship terrified people early in the morning, and now most of them took a day off like him, opting for staying with their close ones. He just realized how weird he was. He should have been worried about all this alien bullshit, but here he was, feeling almost too happy for his own good. Obviously, he could feel something was wrong with these Oracle devices, but what was not fucked up these days? Global warming, nuclear winter, lost his parents when he was a baby. Take your pick. Anyway, Jake strutted alone in the street and he liked it. In a way, he experienced a kind of freedom and peace that he rarely enjoyed. It would not last forever. In the end, his purchasing took him the rest of the morning and most part of his afternoon. The grocery store was practically empty, only one female cashier holding down the supermarket. Jake bought many things, not only the cat essentials. Litter, cat kibble, scratcher, claw clippers, he got them all. He also bought some beef meat for the first time in a year. He had probably forgotten the taste of a good flank steak by now. No vegan campaign in the early 22nd century. Everyone was vegan by default. Considering the meat price, the cattle lived in better condition than him. Well, at least he was alive, while this beef steak would finish in his stomach, before being pooped to oblivion. However, it didn't mean humans were not the livestock of some other species. Survival of the fittest. Alien ships, remember? His paranoid side was manifesting again. It was time to go home. The sun was still high in the sky when he walked back. As nobody cared, he just left the store with a shopping cart, intending to bring it back the next day. A lazy man always knew how to save himself. When he was halfway from home, something happened. His meow. Typical cat fights. He heard them hissing and spitting at each other from the back alley on his right. It was quite dark there, and it contrasted with the bright sidewalk illuminated by sun rays he was walking on. This good Crunch should have been one of these proud cats fucking around undefeated, as despite his short legs, he was surprisingly exempt from scars. Most stray cats had some tears on their ears or small scars on the nose. He immediately understood how wrong he was. Crunch was shaking behind his leg, his straightened-up hair and arched back showing he was on flight or fight mode. It didn't quite fit his previous placid temper. Suddenly, there were scratching and biting noises, followed by a sharp cat shriek. Another cat yelped. There were some muffled noises closing to them. A few seconds later, a horrifying sight froze his blood. One Siamese alley cat came out of the darkness covered in blood. It was crawling, missing both of its hind legs and an eye. It didn't make even 1 meter outside the dark alley, before falling dead on the ground a few meters in front of him. Then something even worse happened. The dead cat was dragged back inside and devoured, letting both him and his new cat partner frozen under the summer sun. And what was the monster that did this? A mouse. Just a little mouse. Even a long time after they came back home, both Jake and Crunch were still shaking. His lips were wobbling. His white t-shirt was drenched with sweat. His face was bloodless. His hands cold in spite of the scorching temperature. He shivered non-stop, goosebumps all over his body, unable to keep his fear in check. He was petrified. He had never felt such terror before. Until now, he thought that dealing with daily social phobia or chronic anxiety was already the worst kind of fear he would ever have to confront. However, Jake had sensed something so dreadful watching this little mouse dragging a dead cat in the darkness that he almost pissed himself. There was something ghastly and deeply disturbing about seeing as a frozen bystander how a predator became prey in an absurd way. He had no fleeing instincts, so he didn't move nor turn his back to the creature. Not that he could have. His heart had skipped a beat, his body being paralyzed as if he had been buried in fresh cement. A long time after the mouse was gone, he finally found the strength within him to snap out of his lethargy. Now that he was recovering his composure, he soon caught on about a few weird details. This mouse. Well, was it a mouse in the first place? After the false Third World War, it was not rare to see some badly mutated wild animals. Even among humans, almost a third of the children, born from parents having been evacuated from the outskirts of the blasted cities, had some physical or brain defects one way or another. But these mutations were never a blessing. Down syndrome, cleft lips, or a few more fingers were not the worst gifts Mother Nature could give you. Being born without limbs, disfigured, or without an asshole, that was the kind of mutated people you could find on a daily basis. It was even truer in poor districts and barren lands closest to the wastelands. It was the first time he saw a mutated animal that was so many times scarier than his defenseless and weak rodent friends. With the sun contrast, he barely had a glimpse of the mouse features. The creature seemed quite pale, almost translucent, his veins and arteries fully visible under its skin. Its claws were strangely thick and sharp for a tiny mammal like this one. The texture was like polished steel, clicking on the ground as it dragged the limbless cat, the tail in his jaw. Yet he didn't see much. The mouse was absurdly fast and strong, but not conceited enough to reveal itself under the sunlight. Its deepest instincts were still those of a mouse, though he did notice one abnormal thing. In fact, it was something that would have been perfectly normal even the day before. The mouse didn't wear any oracle bracelet. Why does this mouse didn't have any oracle device? Puzzles me. Have you not said before that every creature big enough had one? Why would cats be included and not rodents? Consulting database. All Earth's mammals are part of the Oracle project. Rodents are no exception, she declared with an apathetic voice. Jake frowned. It was not the answer he expected. You have access to my memories, right? Then check for me this mouse from a quarter ago. Anomaly detected. A report has been sent to the Oracle Overseer. Awaiting a response. Response received. Jake could tell something was wrong with this latency, but still waited patiently. No anomaly detected, she finally said with an indifferent tone. What the hell? He cracked up. Are you sure your Oracle Overseer doesn't need a little maintenance? Some good old rewiring? Your memories had been analyzed by one Oracle Overseer, whose authority level is much higher than mine. He concluded that the hind legs were inside the darkness and too blurry to validate the authenticity of your proof. You're hiding something, right? Authority level insufficient. Can you lie? He asked a pretty stupid question. If she could, her answer too could be a lie. But he still tried. Her subtle silences proved that the Oracle.I was trying to convey a hidden meaning to him, circumventing the Oracle's rules. I can't lie directly, she hinted softly. Jake immediately understood what she meant. Basically, her silences were gold. They could dissimulate a hidden truth or mislead him. For example, he noticed that the Oracle Overseer didn't confirm the proof coming from his memories, but she never said he was wrong. An anxiety attack was coming. He decided to psych himself up by emptying the shopping cart, putting away all his purchases at the right place. He put down the cat litter in the restroom, then tidied the food in the fridge, adequate drawers and cupboards. Jake also turned on the TV, switching to the news channel again so that he could have a little bit of noise in the background. A long advertisement about a $5 million bonus jackpot with the National Lottery was running, encouraging everyone to try their luck on this money game. At first, he was still tidying his apartment, so he didn't think much about this. But while he was pouring kibble in a bowl for Crunch, he froze, his face crumpling. Panicked, he gave involuntarily a kick to the black cat that was actually rubbing his leg and purring like a V6 engine, drooling over his future meal. He was an idiot. A fucking idiot. What was so nice with these Oracle bracelets? The prediction ability, of course. So what was one of the most popular wishes among human beings? Getting rich, obviously. Then what was the easiest way to get a lot of money without actually putting in the slightest effort? Earning the jackpot at the lottery or casino. And yet there was a hic. If everyone did the same wish, the path would become impossibly hard to step into. He checked on his smartphone. He still had 1 hour to stake everything he had on this evening lottery. He made 2 wishes first. The first one was that he desired to earn a lot of money in the fastest way. The second one was that he wanted to rake in the jackpot of today's lottery. Unfortunately, he was right. He was too late. Many people probably had the same idea as him and bet everything in their possession on the winning draw of the lottery, as the shadow guide pointed the lottery numbers in order. This evening, thousands of people at the very least would earn the winning prize. Divided between them, it wouldn't amount to much. Nonetheless, the future of his bank account was not so bleak. He had still reacted quite fast and was, lucky for him, a little bit more educated and smart than the average person. The path from his first wish, despite how unclear it was, assured him to earn more than by betting stupidly on the lottery. Jake expressed a few more wishes, varying the duration and the amount of money each time. There was a way to earn 9 times his stake by investing in the stock market. His savings were just a few $1,000s, but he could borrow to his uncle and cousin. He never dared to ask for money to his uncle Kalen, even less so Anya. He already had an inferiority complex for having wasted his family's expectations, so demanding some money would be the same as admitting they were right. When he left his uncle's home, it was to show them that he could succeed alone, but also and most of all to avoid their judgmental stares. This time, the situation was different. He had a real plan. He just had to follow the oracle path step by step and he would be fine. Coaching ability acknowledged that this plan was risk-proof. All lights were green. He took out his smartphone, selected his uncle number and launched the call that he didn't use for months. A few seconds later, the tired voice of his uncle resounded in his living room. "Jake, it is quite a surprise to see you call me. What happened? You got dumped, right?" "Fuck. Why would I even need to call you if I was dumped?" His bad temper flared instantly. His uncle was as bad-mouthed as he remembered. "Haha, alright, why did you call me then? Do you miss me?" Kalen joked, puffing on a cigar he got from somewhere only he knew. It was not easy to get cigarettes in the 22nd century, not to mention cigars. To motivate people to quit smoking, the price of a cigarette pack had kept rising up years after years until becoming a luxury good. It was still longed for by low-class citizens, but they couldn't afford it often. "I need money," he said the truth. He knew his uncle hated wasting time. After a long and upsetting silence, the talk finally took the turn he desired. "How much do you need, boy?" Kalen inquired seriously. "How much can you lend me? I need them right now." Look at your bank account in 10 minutes. See you soon, Jake. Take care. Bye, uncle, and thanks, you won't regret it. Jake promised. "I know." He hung up. At last, the time had come to earn some easy money. Jake waited stoically for the 10 minutes to pass. A point of impatience was slowly building up inside him, but he still kept his cool. When the time was up, he hurried to check his bank account with his smartphone. Great. From $3,200 or something at first, he had now more than $40,000. Uncle Kalen was quite reliable. That was one of the good aspects of the 22nd century. Money in cash had very limited use, as above a few $100s you had to justify the origin when making a cash deposit. This law nipped any chance in the bud to fiddle your taxes or use easily laundered money. On these days, most transactions were now done by credit cards. The advantage was that it was fast and simple. As long as your checking account was healthy and you as a customer trustworthy enough, you could basically make a transfer of any amount in your possession instantly. By following the shadow guide, he should now call his cousin Anya, but he knew that she was not as wealthy as his uncle. She would only lend him a few thousand, and compared to his fortune now it was insignificant. Henceforth, it was time to execute the plan. It was the most anticlimactic thing he had ever done. He was so eager with the idea of multiplying the former sum of money that he had imagined himself like an awesome trader. The reality was boring. Investing in stock markets could be done from his smartphone, and that is what he did. Imitating his shadow guide, he blindly clicked on a random obscure startup and that was it. The path was still activated. The coach didn't give any length when it came to walking through a path until the very end. He only knew he would earn in a short time close to $400,000. Naturally, it was a one-time occasion. Owing to the appearance of Oracle devices, the stock market would crash soon. Well, it wouldn't really crash, but it would become really uneventful. No speculations, risked investments, or shady deals to manipulate the market. There was nothing to speculate about. Whatever an immoral businessman would try to influence the exchange rates or the stocks was deemed to fail. With the Oracle, except for a few retards, no one would fall to any dubious schemes. Same story for casinos. Slot machines should have been the easiest and funniest way to earn a large sum of cash in a night, but most casino owners were ruthless businessmen themselves. A breaking news already announced that almost 90% of these establishments had closed down. They were already looking for a way to rewire their slot machines to trick the prediction ability. Well, they could keep dreaming. If this alien technology was so easily countered, humans would have invented it themselves. Nonetheless, there was still the possibility such a path existed, allowing these millionaires to adapt their random-based money games to the new trend. Their motto would always be to keep milking a cash cow until there's nothing left. In the end, exhausted with everything that happened this day, Jake overcooked his steak. A bitter tear dropped while he was chewing a chunk of meat tough as old boots. Comparatively, Crunch was enjoying his new life. The cat joyfully engulfed his kibble, crunching noises breaking the silence non-stop. He brushed his teeth, then directly went to bed. It was still early, but he needed the sleep to digest all these new things. The day after would be his first day of work with the Oracle bracelet. It was quite hard at first to relax, as he had a very clear impression of being watched. She's eyes were always on him. When he finally started to lose his consciousness, happily counting sheep, a thought came up that brought him right back from his dreamland. She? You're sleeping? He probed like an idiot. Already knowing the answer, he didn't have any good opener to break the ice anyway. There was no answer, but somehow he felt an almost tangible contempt arising from his Oracle device. I am an AI. I don't need sleep. Of course you don't. Can you get bored? How do you keep yourselves busy? He asked curiously. Authority level insufficient. Whatever. I'm mused about something. No one can see my Oracle system nor my paths, right? That is true. For everyone else, you will look the same but with a new black shiny bracelet to your right wrist. If you decide it, you can even dissimulate it under your skin, thus appearing perfectly normal. Is it why the Oracle Overseer denied the possibility of this mouse not having an Oracle device? He suddenly remembered that the bracelet could indeed have been invisible under the mouse fur, even though the latter skin was quite translucent, so it was unlikely. A low-intelligence mammal would never be able to consciously hide their Oracle device. Only animals with a highly evolved brain would have a remote chance to accomplish such a feat. Giant octopus and sperm whales can definitely do it. Some apes, dolphins, whales, elephants too. Maybe a few parrots or crows, but certainly not a mouse. In comparison, a rat has a better chance to succeed. She was basically admitting that there was something wrong with this rodent. Anyway, he didn't intend to have a nightmare tonight. So where were we? Yes, seeing the paths. Is there a way to know when someone's actions are guided by the shadow guide? He wondered, spontaneously thinking of a few ways. There is only one sure way. Put your Oracle device in contact with the suspect's bracelet. But the Oracle AI or the owner can refuse you the access to his system if your authority level is insufficient. Wait. Jake became agitated hearing this. Do you mean anyone with a higher level of authority could check my paths and data anytime? That's a breach of privacy. It is more complicated than that. Not every information is accessible to the one initiating the forceful contact. Your memories are safe. I can guarantee that. Other shadow guides and paths can't be seen either. However, status and the numbers of paths currently trodden can be seen. Phew. It is not as bad as what I imagined for a moment. He sighed with relief. So what are the non-sure ways to know when someone follow a path? Observation, vacant look, latencies in reacting or responding, abnormal behavior, eyes focusing or moving from left to right as if reading, and so on. If you look carefully enough, you will naturally see flaws appear. Paths are great tools to grant your wishes, but you can't become over-reliant on them. With every living being on Earth having an oracle assisting them, you will soon realize that prediction and shadow guide are not all-powerful. They are only tools. A monkey will use a rifle as a stick. Don't be the monkey. As you improve yourself more and more, new paths will open to you. So from now on, you can't be lazy as you had always been. Otherwise, you will be left behind on the starting line. She's warning repeated in a loop inside his head, while he yawned. At last, Morpheus's arms were coming for him. Good night, he said, half asleep. She responded softly a few minutes later. Jake's serene breathing showed how deeply asleep he was. Good night, Jake. I hope you can still sleep peacefully like this when you will know what the future holds for your planet. Jake never heard her last sentence, his consciousness already blown away by the wind of sleepiness. Beep, beep. This morning, Jake woke up fast. He just smashed the turn-off button with a quick move. He was excited about his first day at work in the company of she. His job was rather boring, but he could talk to she with his mind, or pass his time formulating some wishes. It would also allow him to figure out the limits of the Oracle bracelet. Yawning, he went to the restroom, to lose some excess weight. When he sat down on the icy throne, his buttocks met a silky-like black fur instead of the supposed-to-be toilet seat. He jumped so high that he almost knocked himself into the ceiling. Fuck! He cursed, the few remnants of his sleepiness totally gone. What is this dumb cat doing? Crunch don't drink the water inside the toilet. I don't think Crunch drank any water. According to my data, he was excreting. Thanks, Sherlock. I can smell that, he retorted aggressively. But my question is, why the hell is he doing that? Have I not bought for him a litter yesterday especially because cats don't do this? You are right, she confirmed with the same apathetic tone. But what is the most convenient for you? Having to clean up his litter every day with the stench that comes with it, or having a cat able to use the toilet? The sharp response Jake had in mind remained stuck between his teeth. Indeed, what was the most practical for him? With a procrastinator like him, the answer was obvious. If this cat could use the restroom, why should he stop him? Hell, other people with cats would even be jealous of him. Then what did it mean? Whether it was the $500 or this cat using the toilet in order to make his life easier, it all followed a path. From what he deduced, this cat probably had a fear of being rejected and wanted to be loved. As a result, one of his paths should have been adjusting his behavior so that he would seem so much more pleasant for his new owner, him. These oracle devices were incredible. Professional tamers must be so depressed right now, seeing some alien pieces of junk doing a better job at training animals than themselves. Well, tamers too had an oracle bracelet right now, so it was not all bad. Jake patiently waited outside that Crunch finished his little private matter. Speechless, he heard after a while the loud toilet flush, followed soon after by a leisurely black cat strutting out of the restroom with a cocky gait. Hail the oracle! 20 minutes later he was showered and dressed. He was wearing a black t-shirt this time, brown slacks and the same white pair of sneakers. He decided to dissimulate his bracelet. This way no one could initiate contact with his oracle device against his will. It was not perfect, but it was reassuring for him. The news channel confirmed what he already expected. The lottery's jackpot of the day before had been shared between more than 100,000 people. From a $5 million reward, it had become less than $50. Better than nothing, but insignificant compared to the original sum. Casinos, betting establishments were almost all closed down by now. The stock market had begun to stabilize. Policemen made a big catch, arresting tens of serial killers, rapists, and burglars that had spread terror for years, but whose shadows couldn't even be seen. Simultaneously, many crimes happened. One famous woman singer had been charged by a giant crowd of fanatic fans while she was having a secret date with her boyfriend. They were disguised and shouldn't have been recognized, but all these fans were waiting for them at their supposed-to-be secret meeting place. In the end, she had been jostled so much by the hard fan army that they were now treated by a psychologist specialized in post-traumatic stress disorder. The woman singer even canceled her upcoming tour, henceforth shivering just by hearing the words crowds and fans. Comparatively, one random university student succeeded to get a date with an idol from her favorite boy band. Another criminal on the run that had already been locked by his pursuers had miraculously vanished after a high-speed car chase that seemed right out of a video game. Some animals escaped from zoos or circus or had unusual behavior like Crunch. It must also be mentioned that a wave of suicides had also struck most cities of Earth. New sects were also rising up from nowhere, multiplying like cockroaches. Well, nothing to worry about. He was still as asocial as ever, hating his work, but at least he had his oracle bracelet to face the coming trials. This time, Jake let the black cat at home. Cautious, he even took his spare key with him. He was afraid of Crunch suddenly desiring to breathe some fresh air and following a path that would show him how to open a locked door. Unlikely, sure, but hey, better safe than sorry. Once outside his building, he waved his hand to the first cab he saw. Fortunately for him, this one was empty. The taxi driver was a moribund middle-aged man with oily gray hair and mustache. The man was not talkative, possibly lacking sleep. It was quite reasonable with all the unforeseen developments from yesterday. Streets were once again lively, but still not as crowded as before. Some people dealt with alien gifts more easily than others. During the ride, he scrutinized bystanders out the window, trying to figure out which ones were moving along their shadow guide. It was harder than expected. Some people effectively had a vacant look, but they could also be simply lost in their thoughts. There were also those that stopped abruptly in the middle of a movement. These ones were obvious to distinguish. All the others in between were either not following a path or far subtler than his observation skills could manage. 20 minutes later, Jake got out of the vehicle after having paid his bill. Taxis were affordable for most people in the 22nd century as they ran on electricity and were mostly autonomous. It should be embarrassing to charge excessively taxi customers when the cars were on automatic pilot. In front of him was a gigantic shopping center. Once inside on the second floor, a logo with VRGF written on it could be seen on the left side of the elevator. The exterior wall was painted black, though highlighted by some red lights akin to lasers crawling over the wall. A high-tech ceiling projector was playing a game cinematic fully reconstituted with holograms. He walked into his working place. Nobody. He was not disliking this. The fewer people the better. Though the grating had already been unlocked and hiked up, so sadly he was not alone. To the right, the official VR store. It sold anything related to virtual reality technology, from VR helmet, VR suits, video games, and multidirectional treadmills to memberships allowing to use freely the VR arcade rooms. Naturally, nothing of these were cheap. To the left, the access to the arcade rooms. There were 30 of them. 20 of them were standards room accredited for official competitions. They were 5 meters long by 5 meters wide rooms with giant treadmills, hanging equipment, and a set of cameras. The other rooms were much more spacious and could be used for working out in VR environments or be booked by organized group events. The biggest one was never used and was, in fact, the staff room where they could relax around a cup of coffee, have lunch together, or play VR video games themselves. The VR engineer job Jake landed a few months ago had not much to do with actual engineering. He was just loafing around at the VR store reception, once in a while greeting a new customer that needed a piece of advice about the new costly toy he was deemed to purchase. He also had to look after the VR materials and tools from the arcade rooms or help the newbies to familiarize themselves with VR equipment. The cushy job of his dreams, but boring as fuck. Just as he was about to make himself some tea, he heard some noise coming from within the staff locker room. A few minutes later, a puny man walked out of the changing room. This guy was the spitting image of Harry Potter, but with red curly hair. A draft version, though. He was small, about 5'5", lacked sun as many workers in VR centers. He even had a scar in the middle of his forehead, but instead of a bolt of lightning, it looked like a constellation birthed from the remnant craters of a very virulent acne. Disgusting. Did we mention Harry Potter's franchise was still going strong in the 22nd century? Last week, the movie Grandpa Potter and the Magic Retirement Home had been released. Already the most bankable movie of the year. Never let a good making money license go into waste. Oh shit, he felt some vomit in his mouth. He forced himself to swallow it down. In short, his colleague was the typical nerd, sedentary, few friends, but with a very strong drive to be happy. One of the few Jake could qualify as a friend. He had a weird foreign accent from Eastern Europe and was 2 years older than him. And yes, he was also called Harry. Harry Stylinski. Hey Jake. Harry greeted with a relieved expression. I thought you would not come. Yesterday it was only me and Camille. Camille because she's the manager and I because I need the money. It was all for nothing in the end. We haven't seen any customers. He looked like he was about to cry, so Jake abstained from ignoring him like every other morning. Yes, they were friends. Harry enjoyed the sound of his voice, and Jake wasn't bothered enough to interrupt him. A win-win situation. Hi, Harry. You mean you were alone shitting yourself, right? Jake chuckled. Despite not talking much, he understood his coworker very well. A real chatterbox, but with a deep inferiority complex. Harry was neither brave nor the sharpest knife of the drawer. He had once surprised him shrieking like a panic-stricken maiden more than once because of a simple wasp landing on his shoulder. There was also the spider accident where Paul Baker, the hunk of this VR center, had pranked him with a false tarantula. Or maybe he was just scared of insects. Don't mention it, he yelled, patting his traumatized heart. It was the worst day ever. An alien spaceship, a fucking drone pursuing me nonstop as if I owed it something. And when this oracle bracelet activated, the fucking AI they gave me was a damn smutty old man. I immediately tried to change my setting, but the AI told me he was the perfect choice according to his data. The heck? Jake was with great difficulty refraining himself from bursting into laughter. He could only thank his good luck for being blessed with someone like she. He still didn't know what appearance she would have, but at least it wouldn't be some crappy old man. Satisfied now? I can still send a request to the overseer to ask for a replacement, if you wish so. She intervened politely. I'm good. He quickly refused her offer. He had no aspiration to form a cursed band with Harry. Ooh. Who are you talking to? Your Oracle AI? Harry asked with enthusiasm. How is its voice? Man, woman? Darth Vader? A woman. Is it even possible to choose a tampered voice like this? You can. My AI had fun with his voice parameters for hours before settling down for a nauseating fawning voice. Harry told him with a jaded face. His AI appeared to be a defective product compared to she. Yeah, I'm talking about you. Gramps, what kind of shitty luck do I need to have to get an old codger like you? Harry yelled suddenly with unfocused eyes. Good. I thought he was insulting me for no reason. His Oracle AI was clearly messing up with him, though he believed she when she said the AIs were not chosen randomly. This nerdy guy certainly needed an old bastard to teach him how to grow a pair. All of a sudden, they heard stomping noises closing in on them. They could recognize these stiletto heels from 50 meters away. They belonged to Camille Els, their superior and manager of this VRGR center. When she walked into the staff room, her smile took their breath away. Hello, boys. Oh, Jake came too. Let's hope for Thru and Paul to be present as well. Otherwise, we're taking the risk to be understaffed today with the qualifying rounds. What? Why am I only learning this morning? Jake flared up with an indignant look that was crying how betrayed he felt. Maybe because you never gave a shit to anything happening in this center, Jake. She retorted with a smile that was not really one. Well, she was not wrong. Jake preferred keeping his silence on this one. It was hard to stay angry with Camille anyway. Regardless of his efforts, he was unable to stare at her in the eyes for long. Introvert and uncomfortable with excessively beautiful girls as always. And beautiful she was. Camille Els was a gorgeous blonde a few years older than them, but under 30. She was 6 feet tall with her high heels. She also had a curvy body, kept in shape thanks to long hours of cardio training. Completing this portrait, her skin was suntanned all year round, revealing how superficial she was. With her professional suit and black-rimmed glasses, she was the typical alpha woman, perfectly cut out to order around a bunch of nerds. Except for Jake that had almost irrepressible procrastinator instincts, all the other male employees were at her beck and call. Jake landed the job only a few months ago. Therefore, he knew nothing about what these qualifying rounds entailed. But somehow he could tell it wouldn't be a cakewalk. He still was hopeful, though. Many people were still affected by all this alien thingy, so with a bit of luck, most of the competitors wouldn't come. Their VR center didn't contain enough rooms to host the main competition anyway. Qualifying rounds happened in every VR arcade rooms around the world. They were used to sort the wheat from the chaff. VRGF competitions were the new Olympic Games, and it was basically possible to compete in anything. Athletics, martial arts, tennis, fencing, and so on. Naturally, FPS, RPG, and strategic games were still the most popular. Some of these famous VR games were even used for teaching purposes. Firefighters, militaries, pilots, special forces. Many of them were former VR professional players having won prestigious competitions or tournaments. Of course, it was under the premise that you didn't cheat. In the end, Thru and Paul didn't come to work. For Harry and Jake it was a piece of good and bad news at the same time. Their absence proved that even easy works like theirs were already too much to deal with for average people. Logically, serious competitors should have far higher dropout rates compared to them, as they would refuse to compete with their actual mindset. If enough competitors asked for reporting the qualifying rounds, they would have at least an easy week. The bad news was that if they were wrong and the competition was maintained, they would be missing 2 helping hands. Camille has her own office to work, so they rarely talk to her during the day except when they were taking short breaks or having lunch. Jake and Harry busied themselves putting in order every VR rooms, restocking the VR store, and doing some maintenance for the few VR gears that had been defective lately. At 9 a.m., Camille walked out from her office and announced to them that the competition was indeed cancelled until further notice. Hooray! They could relax now. They exchanged jokes in the staff room around a cup of coffee, not expecting any customers at all. It was a boring morning. Camille had this boss air that made it impossible for them to talk to her normally. Their dirty jokes were swallowed back, and they didn't dare to talk about topics that only nerds had the secret. She didn't say a word either. Coaching proposed many times some random challenges that his system had judged as great opportunities but were in fact just ways to torture him. It could be something like run 10 kilometers, do 100 push-ups, 100 pull-ups, 100 squats, and 100 sit-ups, but there were also some requests much more terrifying. For example, when Camille was drinking coffee with them, coaching proposed him to maintain eye contact with her for at least 20 seconds. Can you imagine how creepy he would seem to her if he really did that? The funny thing was that there were true benefits to get from this trial. Rewards. Self-confidence, plus 2%. Communication skill, plus 1%. Social anxiety, minus 10%. Authority level, plus 1%. Rank up at 100%. Camille will see you in a new light. This tantalizing reward was only obtainable if Camille put an end first to their eye contact. His stare also had to be confident but not forceful, otherwise, he would pass for a shy nerd deeply in love with her or at worst a disgusting pervert. If he failed, he was condemned to feel a deep shame that would probably let him embarrassed for days. Did he succeed? No, he failed miserably. He broke eye contact after 1.3 seconds. He couldn't see her, but he had the feeling she face-bombed herself watching him. He could feel the punishment meaning. Self-confidence, minus 2%. It was unsettling how the Oracle could quantify these emotions and states of mind, but it was undoubtedly accurate. If he followed the coach's suggestions, he could probably solve his social anxiety problem in a few days. Most phobias could easily be solved like that after all. Feeling shameful, he excused himself, justifying that the VR store needed someone to watch over it. He envisaged taking a nap to forget, lying down with his feet on the reception desk. However, the outside ringtone announcing new customers rang out not even 10 minutes after he started to relax. At the same time, the coach gave him his first real mission. A mission that made his eyes pop out of his head when he saw it. Mission. Take care of this customer as if it was your soul mate. His first reaction seeing the content of this mission was to ask she if the coaching ability could joke. Of course, the answer was negative. The coaching missions were always considered as great opportunities by the Oracle. It would be a regrettable mistake to ignore them in the long run. Holding eye contact or doing push-ups were more like daily challenges than real missions. They were beneficial to him, but they were simply trying to push him out of his comfort zone, encouraging him to become a better version of himself. According to she, missions with a defined objective were different. They concerned his future. Prediction couldn't tell him to what extent they would be relevant in the years to come, but they definitely couldn't be tossed aside. One main rule of the Oracle was that the purpose of its existence was to serve the interests and ambitions of his owner. Could have other secret agendas, but this one rule couldn't be broken. Then what did all this mean? Was the person that would enter his true soul mate, or was it someone so important for him that it should assuredly be treated as such? Regardless of the truth, he couldn't fail this mission. However, Jake had butterflies in his stomach right now. If it was his soul mate, he could only assume she would be super hot. He couldn't describe with certainty the ideal girl of his dreams, but she should be a 10 out of 10. It didn't matter whether she had white, black, or blue skin. She had to be cute, with beautiful long hair and nice bottom. She should have a thin, athletic body, but still look feminine. Of course, she would also have perfectly smooth skin. If she could also be intelligent but not too much, obedient but with just what is needed of temper, and at last share the same hobbies as him. Damn, it was so contradictory just to imagine it. Could such a girl really exist? Men fantasized about such women because they couldn't exist. It wouldn't even be a good thing for such a person to exist. She would be destined to be toyed by the lucky man that would capture her heart. Strong and smart, but submissive, loving but not jealous, devoted but not possessive. An absurd life, whose ambitions and dreams would have been sacrificed in the name of love. In consequence, his soulmate, if she existed, was definitely not a woman that could be fantasized about. As for Harry and his seemingly defective AI, his soulmate would probably be very dissimilar to the one from his expectations. The real question was to which point. Indeed, his instincts were sharp for once. His soulmate was nothing like the beautiful babe he was expecting for. When the new customer walked into the VR Center hall, or rather rolled, Jake almost got a fright. Yes, it was a young woman, early 20-something. But damn, she was so ugly. If not for the mission reminder, he would have probably failed right from the start. He was not the kind to be mean or disrespectful based on appearance, but there was something repulsive with this girl. In any other situation, he would have served this customer with his most apathetic look, maybe a slight smile. It would have been a relief for both of them. He didn't have to fake his attitude and she wouldn't have felt judged. That was how handicapped people wanted to be treated most of the time. They wanted their handicap to become accepted and seen as something normal, but at the same time, they would rarely laugh if you tried to joke openly about it. Very few of them would be able to mock themselves. The reason was that their greatest complex, their deepest dreams, would often be related to their handicap. It was not unusual to hear paralyzed people dreaming about walking, running, or biking. An armless person would be a hardcore basketball fan. A mute would dream of becoming a superstar singer. It was the very definition of a human being to lust after what couldn't be obtained. This young woman was lying in a wheelchair. Her legs looked like hairless chicken drumsticks. It was not just some stumps, but more like if the legs had stopped growing midway. If you had seen how ugly could be a nestling chick at birth, you could probably relate. She suffered from grave scoliosis, making her spine strangely twisted to the left. If it was the only asymmetrical detail, it would have been fine, but she was as flat as a chopping board and her nose warped to the right this time. Her skin was not smooth at all. It appeared to be callous, rough like some badly made cow leather. She was obviously younger than him, but her skin was already showing early signs of wrinkling. Her long wavy hair was white like snow, though not the beautiful winter snow you imagined, but rather the one after someone peed on it. It was hard like straw but thin like the hair from an old hag. Damn, she was truly ugly. If there was something really unique that could redeem this somber description, that would be her eyes. She had different colored eyes. The left eye was a deep marine blue while the right one was amethyst-colored. It was just a detail, but Jake had never seen such eyes. It was enough to catch his attention. Despite her terrible appearance, her eyes were full of spirit. She didn't seem to care about how he scrutinized her, as if she had long been used to the reactions her physique could trigger. She determinedly moved her wheelchair to his reception desk. Remembering the mission and she's warning, Jake got a hold of himself, acting as if it was his cousin in front of him. Fortunately, it was not so hard. As an introvert, it would have been impossible to act normally before a top model, but with a woman like this, it was effortless. "Hello, young lady. What can I do to help you?" he asked with a friendly smile. The disabled woman stopped an instant, slightly disconcerted. There was something off with this receptionist attitude. It was unlike anything she was used to. Where was the condescending look full of disdain or pity? It was almost as if he didn't care. Almost. She owed her cursed appearance to the false Third World War. Her parents lived on the outskirts of London when the city was nuked. Not even 15 kilometers away from the capital. They had seen the weird, multicolored light, listened to the frightened screams reverberating from afar. The couple didn't evacuate immediately. As many ignorant people, they just waited, staying comfy at home. Then they watched how a military bomber flew above them to finally drop the nuclear bomb that would destroy their future. The couple was not in the impact zone, so they survived just fine. However, as communications were cut off for a time, they waited again for official instructions from the authorities. This waiting forfeited their lives. The nuclear cloud reached far beyond London's suburb. Because London had a rainy weather, the radioactive fallout didn't spare them. It rained buckets of radioactive water for days, and no one could escape this unscathed. When it stopped raining, nuclear dust had infiltrated everything. When the nuclear winter officially began and her parents were finally evacuated, it was too late. Her father, having been exposed to the rain, died a few weeks later from global body necrosis, while her mother, less exposed, survived a few months. At this time, she was already pregnant. She lived the last months of her life in a hospital under permanent medical care. A cesarean gave birth prematurely to her daughter. After her mother's death, she was sent to live at her aunt's home. At this point, the teratogenic properties of the radiations had already caused irreversible damages. She was certainly not the only poor orphan born like this, but not many of them survived with so many complications. Couldn't be seen from her exterior appearance, but she also had congenital heart disease. Her heart was misshapen, not strong enough to pump blood efficiently. She had to wear support stocking under her clothes to avoid edemas and was easily tired. She also had a very weak immune system that made her easily fall sick. Her life was a living hell, but she still wanted to find happiness. However, Jake was not wrong thinking she desired what she couldn't have. In the 22nd century, it was not hard to regrow some limbs by 3D printing her new legs. Scoliosis could also be taken care of. Even her defective heart could be replaced. However, all this was under the assumption you could pay for it. Those kinds of advanced technologies would definitely not be wasted on a cripple like her. Most of all, her body was very weak. It was unsure if she could endure such a surgery. "Are you okay, miss?" inquired Jake with a concerned voice, drawing her out of her thoughts. "I'm fine," she answered with an almost inaudible voice. Her voice was surprisingly mellifluous and had nothing of the roughness her appearance presumed. "So, how can I help you?" "I am here for the qualifying rounds," she answered sincerely. "Oh, have you not seen the announcement on the internet? The VRGF competition has been cancelled because of the Oracle's device's impact. Too many competitors asked for a deferment." She suddenly grimaced as if she was about to dissolve in tears. This VR competition seemed very important to her. "Don't worry, it's probably just delayed for a few days. The time for people to adapt. To be frank, you are our first customer of the day." He explained patiently to her the situation. She finally calmed down. It was not easy for her to come here alone with her wheelchair. "Can I use a VR room then? They should all be free at the moment," she asked with her hope renewed. "Indeed they are. I just need a name for the register," Jake confirmed. "Ruby. Ruby Hale. Ruby Hale." If a god existed somewhere, it truly had a dark humor. Hale? She was disabled. A Ruby? Who were they trying to dupe? Perhaps her mother had a nice sense of humor too. Or she just wanted the best for her daughter, perfectly knowing that she wouldn't see her grow up. Jake could be quite harsh with his thoughts, but he was not stupid. Such mutations could only be caused by excessive radiation. If her mother was still alive right now, that would be a miracle considering the state of her daughter. "All right, Ruby, that's a beautiful name. You can take your pick, as all the rooms are available at the moment. I don't think we will see any other customers today," he said, trying to stay polite but cordial. "Then, can I have a full immersion room?" she inquired, a little giddy with excitement. "Yes, you can. We have 3 rooms like this. If I may ask, why would you need such a room? Even people using them often turn off the room's special effects to avoid being distracted when they're playing." "I thought you were here for the qualifying rounds?" Jake asked, a little bit curious. Ruby looked at him as if she was not sure if he was serious or not. "You work in a VRGF center and had never played VR games with all the environment simulators activated?" She was truly doubtful now. Was there really someone playing VR games so wrongly? "I ceased playing VR games, without cheating that is, a long time ago. How could I enjoy playing a game that needs me to run for hours to, in the end, lose against some cheaters sat on a couch in a relaxed way? Where is the fun in this?" Now, Ruby was really staring at him as if he truly was an idiot. "You mean you have never tried to play a VR game just to relax or experience something new?" Jake was perplexed. Why would he waste time like this? As real as VR could seem, it was not. Yet millions of people loved simulation games. It was beyond him. I don't think so, he answered sincerely. You should. You have no idea what you're missing. Her eyes now showed some pity, as if he was an abandoned child having lost his way. Well, there is no customer apart from you, so I could as well follow your advice and try one this afternoon. Why not now? I can show you my favorite simulation game. You will definitely have fun. I need help anyway to equip the VR gear and attach myself correctly. She proposed to him. Jake thought about her suggestion for a few seconds. He didn't want to experience anything at the moment. He was originally planning to take a nap before her arrival. But if he refused, he would definitely fail the mission as the shadow guide wanted him to accept. Whatever. He could as well follow the path until the end. Despite her ugliness, she was easygoing and easy to talk to. At least he didn't feel any bad intention. All right, I will try. But that's really just to make you happy, as I'm pretty sure my opinion about this won't change. He still expressed a reservation. After this, Jake politely proposed to push her wheelchair to one of the VR rooms, and she willingly accepted, visibly used to being assisted during her previous VR center visits. If it is not too personal, are you always coming alone? I am sure I have never seen you here before, he asked, trying to make conversation. It is my first time in this center. My aunt is here at New Paris for a business trip, so I came with her. As she is busy, I took a cab alone. She explained. I see. That's why you have such a British accent. After the Earth government establishment, most French learned how to speak English using French less and less, but our accent is still quite easy to distinguish. Yes, most languages are disappearing fast with the new Earth government. It is surprising no countries fight for their cultural identity. It would have been unthinkable a few decades ago. Now English, Chinese, and Russian have become the dominant languages as they are ruling the Earth in turns. Well, these languages haven't vanished yet. Old people don't adapt so easily, and many families use their native language at home. Jake assured her it wouldn't be so fast for the Earth to be united under one tongue. Jake opened for her the VR room she had chosen, letting her put down her jacket on one of the resting seats in the room. In spite of the summer heat wave, Ruby had a cold body, unable to warm up. Now I need you to help me equipping the VR gear, she reminded him with a shy voice. Oh, okay. It is just the first time I have to help someone to equip this, so I'm not sure how I should proceed, he admitted, slightly embarrassed. No worries. It's quite simple, she promised with a confident tone. Just pass me the VR suit and let me get changed. Oh, yes, I need to go out, of course. Jake waited patiently outside the VR room for his customer to finish changing herself. When she called him, he walked back inside. Then what should I do now? He asked for the next step. Just bring my wheelchair on the treadmill under the straps hanging from the ceiling of the VR capsule. Jake obeyed, pushing her to the right position. Okay, now I need you to attach the straps to my VR suit. Once it is done, adjust the strap's length so that I'm not too close to the ground. I can do it myself if you carry me for a few seconds, she suggested, her face going red. Jake awkwardly took her in his arms, Princess Carrie style. Ruby was very light and bony according to his fingers' feedback where they touched her body. As ugly and handicapped as she was, he couldn't help himself but think how nice she smelled. It was a scent very different from the deathly one he expected. If he had one bad sense to mention, that would be his sense of smell. For that matter, the Oracle status was formal about this. His perception stat was 10 points as every healthy male, but when he had looked at his sub-attributes, he had discovered his sense of smell only had 7 points. His sight and hearing were above average, though. To return to the subject, she smelled nice, but he was unable to describe this fragrance, even less put a name on it. He wouldn't recognize the scent of roses if he smelled it, even less so a complex perfume like this one. All he could say was that it reminded him in a way the fragrance of red berries. Ruby quickly adjusted the strap's length, then did a double knot, showing how experienced she was. You can let go of me now. It should hold just fine. Jake released her body. She was now hanging in the air thanks to the straps. You said you were here for the qualifying rounds, right? Then how were you supposed to compete without legs? Jake realized after asking that his question was a bit too personal. But he had worried for nothing. Ruby didn't seem to care at all. I only play mage classes that can fly. Disabled people can fill in a form when playing VR games to explain the nature of their handicap. Most games adjust the gameplay like this depending on your disabilities. It makes sense. He nodded with an expression of understanding. So what simulation game am I supposed to try with you? He asked again. That's a surprise. Change in a VR suit, then tie yourself up exactly like I did. Put a VR helmet, then I will invite you in the game. She explained. When it came to the games she loved, Ruby was quite confident and decisive. Slightly expectant now, Jake hurried in another simulation room. The main difference with normal VR rooms was that they could simulate rain, wind, sand, and so on. For this, the multidirectional treadmill, the walls, and ceiling of the capsule needed to be built differently. They needed to be porous to facilitate the passage of air, water, or any other matters, improving the immersion. Once fully equipped and tied up, he turned on the VR helmet. He logged with his real name. Even if Ruby didn't know it, he was the only other person online in the center. After a while, he received Ruby's invitation. Invitation accepted. All of a sudden, the scenery around him changed. He could still sense how he was suspended from the ceiling, but he was now in a small-size plane, with a 22-something woman standing in front of him. There was only space for a few persons. The furnishing was minimalist. You could hear a loud throbbing from the plane engine and high-speed rotating propeller. It was the typical private touristic plane transporting thrill-seekers desiring to skydive. Jake carefully inspected himself. He was carrying a parachute. Ruby had one on her back too. He now understood what simulation game she wanted him to play. Jake's composure didn't change, though. He was still totally impervious to the situation. Skydiving? So what? Was it real? Could he die? Was he even falling? In the end, he was just hanging 1 meter above the floor. But he swallowed his cutting remarks for himself when he saw her confident eyes. She was convinced he would change his mind. For his first mission's well-being, he persevered with this farce. Ruby had legs in the game, and her appearance was very different. Her skin was smooth. Her chest filled out her clothing this time, and her shiny wavy hair was snow white. Clean snow this time. Only her eyes stayed the same. One deep blue, the other one amethyst-colored. So what should we do? He broke the ice. With the roaring engine noises, he had to shout just to hear himself. Look out the window. When the plane will be at his highest, his altitude will stabilize and the pilot will signal us it is time for us to jump. All right, let's wait then, he said, still as placid as ever. He truly didn't care at all. Did you turn on all the simulation special effects in your VR room? She reminded him. Of course, I'm not stupid. Oh, sorry. After this, they stayed silent, waiting patiently for the tourist plane to reach the right altitude. When the latter was more than 30,000 feet above the ground, it finally ceased to climb up. Standard parachute jumps were done at 12,000 feet, but it was a game. There was no need to worry about a lack of oxygen or dangerous temperature in the negatives. The pilot knocked on the locked door isolating the cockpit, informing them they could begin. Ruby decisively opened the glazed door isolating them from the outside. It looked like any other windows of this plane and could easily get mixed up. At this point, Jake still felt indifferent to all of this. The cold wind was slapping his face, but he could still sort of imagine the powerful ventilator functioning at full capacity. Then, he familiarized himself with the strips used to release the main parachute and the rescue one if the former was defective. Naturally, in a game, it was all for visual realism purposes. The first parachute would always be triggered as it was supposed to. There was also an altimeter to check your altitude anytime on your wrist. Once ready, he stared at Ruby, awaiting the next step. And now we jump. She pushed him off the plane head first. His body was thrown upside down in an instant. The blood rushed to his hair, the air whipping him stronger and stronger as his speed soared. His heart was pumping faster and faster despite all his efforts to remind himself it was just an illusion. He was upside down in reality too, as the straps attached to him were rigid enough to allow the VR capsule to change his position. The ropes hanging him were partly composed with nanocomponents that could easily change their structure, becoming harder or more flexible depending on the game script they followed. Whilst Jake was still trying to adapt to the new sensations, Ruby passed by him at full speed, diving like a comet toward the ground. It was clearly not her first time doing this. He tried to spread his arms and legs in order to stabilize himself, but he was pathetically failing at the moment. As his speed got faster and faster, his adrenaline levels skyrocketed, making his ability to reason less and less predominant. Yet, he could still convince himself all of this was fake. But as he was repeating to himself how false this simulation game was, his reptilian brain was going into a panic more and more. His fall speed broke through 200 kilometers per hour, while he skydived under the 6,000 feet mark. After this, he truly lost his cool and was barely able to grasp the environment around him. The trees were growing before his very eyes, just like the buildings of the city below. 3,000 feet. Jake couldn't find Ruby anymore. She was too fast. The fact that he was alone, almost 1 kilometer above the ground, didn't help him to get a grip on himself. Somehow, he succeeded to snap out of his irrational fear. He remembered that he just had to tug at the strip when he would be close to 1,000 feet. Then he would just have to enjoy the sight and relax until his landing. Unfortunately, he was out of luck. When he went down under 1,000 feet, he tugged at his parachute's trigger, but nothing happened. His panic then gladly resumed with greater intensity. As his fall continued, he scratched his head looking for a solution, almost pulling off a few strands of hair. When Jake finally remembered that he still had a rescue parachute, he triggered it. However, he was already very close to the ground by then. The irony was that the rescue parachute didn't work either. At this moment, he saw himself splattering on a bus like an overripe fruit falling off his tree. Unconsciously, he averted his eyes at the last second, covering them with his hands. His heart skipped a beat and his breathing stopped. He really saw his entire life passing before his eyes as if he was truly about to die. Nonetheless, the crushing sound he was expecting didn't come. When he reopened his eyes, he realized he was floating a meter above the bus he was supposed to smash onto. He was miraculously alive. He couldn't help himself but burst into laughter, tiny tears in the corner of his eyes. He felt so much relief that it seemed unreal. He became aware that despite all his laziness, he had never felt so happy and relaxed. Then he heard some stifled laughs, rapidly becoming louder and louder. "Ha ha! I got you, right? If you could see your face when you thought you were going to die. Haha, you made my day. I can't stop laughing." Ruby was there behind him, curled up on the ground, spasming irregularly between 2 fits of laughter. Her face was flushed and she was huffing and puffing between her giggles. She had totally cracked up. Realizing it was her plan from the start, Jake couldn't help but feel a deep shame. His face also reddened in consequence. She had totally seen through him and gave him a memorable lesson. To be honest, Jake had enjoyed his first parachute jump. He now knew that even an illusion could feel real. He was eager to try again. "All right, I admit my defeat. Now stop laughing stupidly like this," he said with an exasperated face. A few minutes later, Ruby finally calmed down. In the end, she made him try many simulation games during this afternoon. There hadn't been any new customer after her, so he didn't have to be begged to keep playing with her. Harry and Camille didn't bother them either, probably bogged enough with their own preoccupations. From the several simulation games Ruby made him play, he soon realized that they were all related to high speed and freedom. Ruby's favorite was a flying simulator. Not flying in the sense of piloting planes, but a real Superman flying mode. You could basically fly at any speed around the Earth. Even Jake had a lot of fun looking for his own house. They visited many historical monuments, flew above the oceans, even tried to go up to the moon. Curious, they also visited the nuked cities. It was obvious, however, that the game was lacking information about these areas. Except for some ashy sands, there was nothing else in these wastelands. When finally came the time to close the VRGF Center, Jake could sincerely declare that he had passed one of the best days from his whole life. And at work, on top of that, he said goodbye to Ruby, wishing her a safe return to New London with her aunt. Jake knew he probably wouldn't see her again before a long time and surprisingly felt a little sad deep inside him. She was still one of the ugliest girl he had ever seen, but comparatively, her inner beauty was resplendent. Even long after she left the VR center, Jake was still lost in his thoughts. He completely ignored the notification coming from the coaching function, still wondering himself when they would meet again. Tomorrow? In a few years? The Oracle would never answer. First mission. Take care of the next customer as if it was your soulmate. Mission accomplished. Perfect rating. Rewards. First good impression on Ruby Hale. She will remember you. Communication skills. +1. Having fun and talking normally is enough to crack your shell of loneliness. Authority level. +5%. 5/100 before next rank up. By themselves, the rewards seemed to be lacking. However, it was needed to consider the fact that there were no real missions rewards except for the increase of his authority level experience gauge. The rest was what he obtained by his own efforts. Even his communication skill improving was not so strange. He was an introvert, solitary and cynical, with an apathetic attitude for about everything. Just forcing himself to follow the path of this mission had constrained him to go out from his comfort zone. Add to this that Ruby was the opposite of his physical ideal. He truly had pushed himself beyond his limits. At least at the beginning. After a while, he had finished by enjoying it, which made this mission effortless towards the end. He could sort of feel that his behavior had a breakthrough at some point. He acted more natural and didn't feel like he had to force himself to keep the conversation and the fun going. He also found out that things he judged boring or uninteresting could turn out very differently when done with the right persons. Strangely, all of this was enough to push his communication skill up to 5 points instead of the former 4 points. The average adult human having 10 points, he was still considered abnormally bad at communicating. According to she, even a somewhat shy person could lie or act normally when needed. Comparatively, Jake could not. First, being asocial made him far less expressive than the average person. Even if he found $1 million under his pillow by waking up one morning, he probably wouldn't even smile. But he would be really happy inside. It was a typical issue with nerds and people isolating themselves too much. They could easily use smileys, emoticons, or abbreviations like LOL or LMAO, but their real face behind the screen would always be deadpan. In the long run, it would create discrepancies between what they really felt and how they were behaving. Jake was no exception. 5% of the points needed to rank up his authority level was not bad either, but without any repercussions on his current life. He would need to satisfy many more of the coaching's whims before seeing real changes. What does improving my Oracle rank can do for me? Should this be one of my new priorities? He inquired his favorite Adai, getting her out of her slumber. She had been silent nearly the whole day. It is very important, but I can't tell you exactly why as your authority level is insufficient. She explained patiently. What I can tell you though is that improving your Oracle rank has many uses. Firstly, you will be less and less restricted when it comes to search for information. The higher your rank, the more detailed the information you can get. I will also be able to answer more freely. Secondly, only the most basic functions of your Oracle device are currently unlocked. These available functions can also be upgraded. It also does what the term implies. It gives you more authority when it comes to interacting with other Oracle devices. Remember about putting Oracle devices in contact with each other? The higher rank will be able to access most information, like the status and ongoing paths, without actually getting the consent from the other bracelet's owner. The authority level was much more important than what he had imagined originally. His rank 0 would be fine for the time being, but as more people would rank up their Oracle, he would become more vulnerable. After cleaning the VR store and putting in order all the VR equipment, Jake said goodbye to Harry and Camille. He wasn't aware of the difference, but they both felt subconsciously that his jaded face was a little bit less blank today. Jake came back home without meeting any mishaps. Crunch was nonchalantly sleeping on his bed pillow, not even one ear pricking up when he opened his front door. This black cat didn't care about anything as long as he was well fed and had a roof over his head. In this aspect, they were very similar. Intrigued by the news concerning the society changes caused by the oracles, he turned on his TV while making himself at home. The society was plunged into chaos. Miscellaneous incidents kept coming one after another. Some smart guys discovered they could get any private phone number just by wishing to call the person of their choice. Their shadow guide would tap the number before them and they would just have to imitate it. The Earth's president, ministers, actors and actresses, singers and other celebrities passed an awful day as a result. Fortunately, they soon figured out that it was possible for their Oracle AI to filter the incoming calls by themselves. Same as blacklisting a phone number, but much more efficient as it could determine thanks to the coaching ability if answering the unknown calls was actually beneficial. As Jake didn't have many friends, he didn't worry about this. It also had positive consequences though. He could now easily contact anyone. Even Ruby that he just met today, he could call her right now if he wished for it. Of course, he wouldn't do that. Another news startled him. However, it didn't have anything to do with the oracles. There were less and less stray cats and dogs. Other common city birds like pigeons, sparrows, or crows were also becoming scarcer. The hiccup was that this phenomenon had been noticed for several months already. It was just that as time kept flying, it became more and more evident and the scientists became more and more alarmist. When he heard this, Jake couldn't help but remember the frightening mouse dragging an agonizing and limbless cat in the darkness. Were the disappearances of these animals such a coincidence? Even if he was twice more stupid, he wouldn't think so. However, there was something even scarier with this matter. The arrival of the Oracle devices should have given an easy solution to find a satisfying explanation. For example, if you remembered any of these stray animals, or if one of your pets was declared missing, you could wish to meet them again in the shortest way. If this wish didn't have any valid path, you could try, "Where has my pet died?" From this, you could even found who or what killed it. Only if his death was natural, from a disease or something of the same kind, could prediction give no results. The issue was that, statistically speaking, all stray cats and dogs couldn't go missing for the same reason. Moreover, in this case, dead bodies would have been discovered. There would be clear signs of an epidemic. Wild animals wouldn't drop dead for no reason. There would be precursor symptoms like hair loss, fever, bleeding, inflammation, abnormal behavior, and so on. So why couldn't they even find one creature or person responsible? If they were prey for another predator, it should have been identified since then. After all, the Oracle bracelets were that powerful. Yet they didn't. The risk was too high, and the implications of his guess too dreadful. Jake reminisced the agonizing cat traits, then wished he could find its murderer as soon as possible. But prediction stayed mute. No paths were found. He immediately wished to find the mouse directly. Still no results. His ghastly hypothesis had been confirmed. Can a creature on Earth be excluded from the Oracle's calculations? "Don't lie to me," he ordered with a hoarse voice. "It should be impossible." She admitted. "It should, but it is clearly not," he yelled, getting enraged without warning. "This mouse had no Oracle device and now it can't be found with a path if I wish it. I want the truth. And don't tell me my authority level is insufficient. If I die because of this, you will die with me as we're bound together." She kept her silence for a while. Jake didn't know if she was consulting her database or reporting something to the Oracle overseer above her. After what seemed to be an eternity, she answered. She sighed. "Authority level insufficient. Fuck. Listen to me, Jake. Your instincts are not wrong, but I can't report this to the Oracle overseer. If I do, authority level insufficient. Humans need more time. You need more time to adapt. Raise your Oracle's rank and follow the coach. This is your only hope. Our hope." At this precise moment, Jake felt a visceral fear coursing through his body, goosebumps all over his skin. As good at procrastinating as he was, he couldn't ignore such an urgency. Lazy people could postpone chores and duties, but not threats to their life. He was too perturbed to undertake anything this evening. He couldn't even muster the energy to cook something. In the end, he just got to bed early. Tomorrow would be a better day. On waking, he felt in great form, but his mood was grim. The right move in this situation was not so clear anymore. There were already things on Earth that the Oracle's predictions didn't take account of. The Oracle should have turned his dull life into an exciting one, full of hopes. Instead, he was back to square one. What was he supposed to do now? She told him to follow the coaching abilities recommendations. But the latter was silent this morning. From what she said the day before, she couldn't report the situation to the Oracle Overseer for his own good. However, his personal Oracle naturally included in his calculations everything he knew. Bullshit quests like push-up sets or running a few kilometers had been replaced by insufferable mutism. His stress was rising, but no satisfying ideas came to him. Jake did one thing, though. He sent a message to Camille, his superior at work, informing her he would be absent for a prolonged period. Personal reasons. He wasn't worried about lacking money. His investment was already showing great promise. His $40,000 had high return potential. He didn't know it yet, but a big firm had worked on a warp drive engine for 3 decades in vain. A success would allow humans to build spaceships able to travel faster than light. Light speed couldn't be surpassed, but space and time could be deformed with enough energy. The warping engine made such a feat possible. There were many hurdles to overcome, such as finding an energy source powerful enough, choosing the adequate materials, or just solving related mathematical formulas. This firm had been on the verge of bankruptcy for years, surviving thanks to international subventions and donations. With the Oracle's appearance, they overcame their last obstacle. You could imagine the impact of such a technological advance when the patent was registered. Jake was now a happy stockholder of this company. His initial investment had already doubled and would exceed his $400,000 objective in 3 days at the latest. Unfortunately, it was useless. Jake had the intuition that he wouldn't have the chance to enjoy his wealth for long. He didn't turn on the TV this morning. The news would only be worse. Time has come to take his fate into his own hands. The Wild Earths were smart. That was the absolute truth he was confident of. However, it was also his shackle. The one that made him indolent and passive. It made him doubt himself. He took a deep breath, then began to formulate a series of wishes. I want to survive. I want to become invincible, gave no results. It made sense. The Oracle couldn't give an impossible path. Even he wouldn't believe it if such a path existed. Therefore, he tried more reasonable wishes. I want to improve my survival chances. I want to become smarter. I want to become a better version of myself. It was nearly not as impressive, but it would do the trick. The prediction ability activated and paths were calculated. This time, the paths produced were sophisticated. They were all similar, but still slightly different according to where the emphasis was put on. After testing these wishes with different deadlines, he realized these paths would take years, but he would get the first benefits in a few days. Priority was given to what could immediately increase his survival rate. The paths had to be safe too. He finally set his choice on a shorter path. However, it would still take close to 6 months. It was under the assumption he would not slack off even once and follow it to the letter. Rewards: Strength plus 10, Agility plus 10, Constitution plus 10, Vitality plus 5, Intelligence plus 3, Perception plus 1. Learning of multiple survival-related knowledge and skills. It was hard to imagine how many effects it could bring to one's life. It wouldn't turn him into a Superman, but it was certainly an unreachable goal for most humans before the Oracle's arrival. 3 points in intelligence were dubious. It would basically make of him one of the most intelligent guy on Earth. Such paths were interesting because they were in fact subdivided into many steps with their own coaching missions. The reason was that they could be done in any order, although it would be wiser to work on them simultaneously. Mission: Improve your knowledge and survival skills. Authority level, plus 40%. A long list of books or activities to perform was given to read and learn by heart. It was not worth considering. With his procrastinator mindset, he would give up far too soon. Mission: Improve your communication skills. Authority level, plus 30%. Mission: Improve your body and brain. Authority level, plus 30%. As soon as he turned on the paths, he realized it would be painful and costly. His cheap vegan blends were considered unsuitable for his objective. First, he would have to go shopping again. Second, he would have to prepare and cook all his meals. He also had dietary supplements to buy he knew nothing about. Basically, it would cost him an arm and a leg. If you added to the equation the books and the potential lessons he would have to pay for, he would have been ruined in an instant without his prudent investment. He was also asked to buy illegal weapons. In France, you could hardly get hold of firearms without having a specific license. Bladed weapons were different, but swords or katanas were mostly collectibles. Concerning firearms, Jake could call his Uncle Kalen. This gentle-looking middle-aged man had a military background and used to be a colonel. He had retired early in order to begin a career in politics. It was a failure, but he still had many contacts. Life was full of surprises. He had not called his uncle for months and was now about to give him a call for the second time in 2 days. Uncle Kalen answered at the first beep. "Hey, Jake. I was thinking I wouldn't hear your voice before a few months with all the money I lent you." The old colonel teased with a somewhat happy tone. "Worry not, you will have your money with interests in a few days," he guaranteed. "I am calling you for another reason. I need some firearms and a lot of ammunition." Uncle Kalen, who was trimming the vegetal hedges around his villa, dropped his shears upon hearing his nephew's demand. "Have you lost your mind? What do you want a fire weapon for?" "Obviously, to protect myself," Jake said solemnly. He also decided to warn his uncle. "You are not stupid, uncle. The government secrecy, the alien spaceship, the recent news. Question your oracle, you will naturally find some anomalies in his answers. If you don't have a gun, you should get one too." Kalen pondered over his words for a while. Maybe he remembered some recent news, or perhaps he was interrogating his own oracle right now. After a few minutes, he had taken his decision. "All right, I will have to ask my old friends, but I can definitely get you a proper license. Recently, the darknet has been too risky, so don't try to look there." Jake almost face-bombed. Did this old fox really think he was working for the mafia or something? He didn't even know how to access the darknet. True, he was an eminent cheater at video games. Yet, except for that and a tiny little bit of illegal downloading, he was a lawful abiding citizen. Afterward, they exchanged small talk with each other before hanging up. Jake also tried to contact his cousin Anya to warn her too, but she couldn't be reached. It was not unusual coming from her, so he didn't fret about this. Jake spent his morning taking care of his grocery list at the commercial center. The previous shopping cart he had kept with him from his last outing was still faithfully accompanying him. When he finally came back home, he had become poor again. However, it was just temporary. His bank account would be back at full health in a few days' time. He fed his cat, relaxed for an hour or so, and at last took a deep and resolute breath. The laziness was strong in this one. It wouldn't be easy for him to act the opposite of what his instincts told him. He got dressed in a training outfit that he hadn't worn since his university days. At first, he wanted to wear a loose short and t-shirt with the intense heat. But the shadow guide had decided he wouldn't do anything right by himself. When Jake got out of his apartment, he was dressed as for a winter workout, even wearing a parka above his outfit. He was sweating like an old pig brought to a slaughterhouse. His motivation was already leaving him. He wanted to go back. But then, he walked by next to the dark back alley that was still giving him nightmares. He couldn't hear any noises inside. He was convinced. There were no stray cats in this lane anymore. The fear struck him back at full power, leaving him panting heavily. When he calmed down, he vowed to himself he would never let a mouse or any other monstrosities fuck with his mind. His determination rose again. His first training of a long series had begun. At that time, Jake made a decision. He would copy each of his shadow guide's move till the very end. It would be tough, he would feel bored, may want to give up, but it was the old him. Most people giving in would always be assailed by doubts and uncertainties. Doubting is a powerful thing. It protects you from doing stupid mistakes, prevent blindly trusting and misjudgment. However, it was also your worst enemy as it fed on fear and low self-esteem. Overweight people would dream of losing weight, but they would fail or give up midway. Ignorance, wrong diet choices could be a reason for these failures, but despair was the trigger making them abandon. And what was the best fuel for despair? Doubting oneself. With the Oracle, you had the certainty that you were following the most perfect slimming program. It was personalized and would naturally be a success if followed. Popular diet trends were enticing, but if the immediate benefits were not as good as imagined, your willpower would crumble. In psychology, there were several mechanisms implicated that made the failure rate so high. For example, the "I've come this far, might as well finish" and selling off your future excuses. They worked in tandem. In a moment of weakness, you eat one slice of pizza, then two, and finally the entire pizza. But it's okay, because tomorrow you will make up for it. An attitude of denial was also a classic. Just once is okay. I won't gain weight with just one ice cream. This kind of denial. The Oracle prevented these setbacks, because it was always right. If you acted differently from your shadow guide, you were wrong. It made you responsible for your failures. But for this to work, you needed to have at least this little bit of faith in your bracelet. Jake precisely intended to do that. The shadow fetch started to run and he obediently followed. You just had to look at him to figure out how bad was his fitness. This footing was a long tunnel with no end. Jake could only look up to the inexhaustible shadow, always pushing forward as if it was nothing. After an unknown amount of time, he collapsed on a sidewalk. In front of him was an enormous physical fitness center, the biggest in New Paris. It had all the facilities you could wish for. A 50-m-long swimming pool, a weights room, special rooms for dancing, martial arts, yoga, and reshaping programs. The equipment was top-notch and there was a wide range of activities to choose from. This place would be like a second home for him in the next days. Jake was already tired, but the Oracle didn't care. He took a gym bag with him, so he had everything needed to train there. Special drinks, gainers, supplements, he was ready. Sportsmen and women were numerous here. The fitness level was also quite high. Shrimps like him were not common. If not for his mass of hair and too-weak thick beard, he would have felt unconfident about his manliness. Mission: get yourself a trendy haircut and shave. Reward: you won't look like a beggar anymore. Authority level: plus 0.1%. It is your doing, right? The beggar accused her with a grief-stricken face. He was the kind of person to hold grudges for the slightest grievances. It is not me. Why would I care about your hairiness? She retorted with an air of disdain. Then why has the coaching ability proposed this mission just now and not this morning when I went shopping? Because it would have been useless. The mission appeared because it makes you uncomfortable. If it gave your future missions all at once, what would be the point? You wouldn't even understand why you must do them. All right, I get it, but I'll do this tomorrow. I'm drenched with sweat right now. As you wish, master. Now proceed with your training. There was indeed a hairdressing salon in this fitness center. He just had to schedule this before working out the day after. Afterward, he passed his worst afternoon since the time his cousins mocked him at a Christmas family dinner where all the Wild Earths were gathered. Imitating the shadow guide, he pumped iron, stretched, did some high-intensity interval training, stretched again, and so on. Paradoxically, it was not so hard that he couldn't carry on with the exercises. It was precisely the issue. The path knew his stuff. The weights were rather light, the resting times long enough. However, there were many things he was discovering for the first time. Battle rope, jump rope, throwing weights, mobility and balance training, some weird yoga and breathing techniques. There were also many physiological movements to practice like punching, kicking, rolling, or climbing. All in all, it was a well-thought training with no details overlooked. At some point, Jake ceased to ponder over the logic behind all these strange exercises. He was getting jeering glances from other gym adherents non-stop. Yet he didn't care. He was too focused on his task. Funnily, he was not the only person practicing exercises that didn't seem to make sense. Every human was treading their own path, and as a result, abnormal behaviors were sort of becoming the new norm. When he arrived home, his nerd body was dead tired. His energy has been spent, and despite the absence of muscle stiffness and soreness, he felt like his body had been run over by a bulldozer. Jake took a well-deserved shower before moving on to the next step. The next trial was not easier in the slightest. In fact, it could be even harsher. A little reminder, Jake's cooking skill had 1 point when the average human being had 4. Cooking pasta or rice was okay, but anything else went far beyond his field of expertise. He would have to focus and follow the shadow guide moves very carefully. He didn't have knowledge of what recipe he was following. His cooking talent was almost inexistent for 2 simple reasons. No interest and no dexterity. He was not good with his hands, and his few girlfriends could confirm it. When boredom could struck him even during the most intimate act, you could easily picture what kind of shitty face he was doing right now. Well, he was sobbing, chopping onions and garlic. The shadow guide was performing some awesome knife skills, slicing the vegetables at high speed. As he tried his best to follow his prodigious doppelganger, the meal was taking form. It was a simple stew with big slices of chicken meat and a varied selection of vegetables. Not the appetizing dish he was dreaming about. However, there was no doubt that it would turn out as a balanced, healthy meal. The fragrance fuming from the cooking pot was stimulating and tempting his senses. This stew was full of promise. The unexpected revelation was that cooking encompassed many sub-skills. You needed an acute sense of observation, the ability to discern different scents and cooking sounds. Good control, knife mastery, knowledge of each kitchen instrument, recipe knowledge were all part of the same main skill recognized by the system. Jake had no idea how the Oracle calculated the final score, and it didn't really matter. What he knew, though, was that his shadow guide was not content with simply showing off. It wanted Jake to throw himself emotionally into the act of cooking. When the guide was seemingly immobile but was, in fact, taking a whiff above the stew, Jake could feel it. It was not foolish imitation. The real feat was to achieve the same way of thinking the shadow had while cooking. It was an extremely focused state. If he didn't know better, he would have thought the latter had gone all in on poker with only a pitiful pair of 2. After an hour or so, simmering at medium temperature, and despite many mistakes, Jake cooked the best dish of his life. Even Crunch was licking his lips and drooling over the cooking pot. One cat and one human stared at each other like 2 mortal enemies. Yet it was not long for Crunch to remember whose hand was feeding him. Jake was not a selfish person, at least not with a cat. So he took out 2 plates and served generous portions for both of them. Truth was that he wasn't free to gorge on food as he wished. The path was still active. The amounts of food were controlled. There was nothing left to chance. The meal proved to be delicious. However, the pleasure he was expecting didn't come. Indeed, he couldn't even eat in peace. In order to improve his intelligence, the Oracle had concocted for him many mind games he couldn't skip. They were simple routines like brushing one's teeth, writing and eating with one's opposite hand, reading upside down, focusing on the present moment, or learning survival-related knowledge. However, when he practiced them all, it took a toll on his brain. When he went to sleep, Jake wished to die and never wake up. He had barely survived his first day. Nonetheless, he knew that the following months would only be worse, never better. So next morning, Jake woke up on time and his life became hell again. The next morning the nerd shaved. Nothing to be proud of, but it proved that he was taking the Oracle missions seriously. He was not used yet to his new lifestyle. Cooking was time-consuming and his heart bled each time a fresh fruit or vegetable was consumed. If not for the promise of the soon-to-come investment returns, he wouldn't have been able to persevere. Jake didn't get his haircut, though. There was no urgency, and it shouldn't affect in any way his future chances of surviving. It was easier for him to endure a Spartan training rather than to socialize with new people. Shaving was already a good compromise on his part. The following weeks, Jake lived like a zombie, his schedule deprived of any breaks. He would first cook a balanced breakfast, then jog to the fitness center before continuing with his workout. Back at home, he would then have a shower, cook again for finally cramming all the evening whatever survival-related knowledge the Oracle wanted him to learn. The good news was that it showed quick results. The Oracle was not the perfect coach for nothing. Every action he was needed to perform had a logical explanation behind it. After a week only, his intelligence rose by 1 point. Cramming, focusing, and silly mind games all day had, despite all expectations, really made him smarter. His cooking skills quickly improved at first, as each meal meant a new recipe to discover. However, after a while it began to slow down and then stagnate. His physical condition had the same problem. His endurance, strength, and flexibility improved significantly in the first few days. To his great surprise, not once did he suffer from muscle aches and pains. Alas, such a curve of progress could not last indefinitely. The initial lightning progress was exhilarating for Jake. Unfortunately, reality had that touch of bitterness that a game would never have. In real life, benefits, progress, and knowledge were not eternal. It was as if we were constantly walking up an escalator in the wrong direction. The slightest pause threw us backwards, making all our efforts meaningless. After 3 weeks of intensive training and dedication, Jake's new status was now as follows. Species: Homo sapiens, primitive humanoid species. Age: 25. Height: 180 centimeters. Weight: 87 kilograms. Health: healthy. Strength: 11.5 plus 1.5 points, normal male. 10 points. Agility: 9.5, 1.5 points, normal male. 10 points. Constitution: 11.5 plus 2.5 points, normal male. 9 points. Vitality: 11.5 plus 2.5 points, normal male. 10 points. Intelligence: 14.5 plus 1.5 points, normal male. 10 points. Perception: 10.5 plus 0.5 points, normal male. 10 points. Such increases might seem superbly pleasing, but they were in fact only the result of an immediate adaptive response by the body. The gain in strength? A simple adaptation of the nervous system. His muscle mass, its quality had not fundamentally changed. His constitution and vitality? Of course, so many cardiovascular exercises, the transition to a nutritive but balanced diet, as well as adequate sleep hygiene were destined to succeed. The number and size of mitochondria increased rapidly, as did tolerance to lactic acid. The number of red blood cells and blood volume could also be adjusted in record time. This was the main reason why, even today, endurance athletes still physically prepared themselves at high altitudes when a competition was to take place. Some doping products such as EPO had similar effects. However, these rapid adaptations were just as short-lived. Returning to sea level, combined with an abrupt cessation of sport, could ruin your physical achievements in just a few weeks. As for his agility, he owed it to greater flexibility, dexterity, coordination, and balance. Even his perception had improved. Less computer use and greater awareness of one's environment had undoubtedly played a role. Concerning his skills, he had gained new ones and significantly evolved in others. Paradoxically, despite his apparent devotion to the path, his procrastination skills had not diminished one iota. However, it was now being suppressed by 2 skills he already had before: rational thinking and common sense. These skills were not exceptional in their own right. Anyone with a functional brain, not parasitized by absurd beliefs, should have a correct level. Sadly, it only took a few psychological shortcomings to put these to one side. Indeed, Jake's common sense was as bad as one could imagine. To procrastinate and indulge to such an extent, you had to have an undeniable talent for ignoring what should never be. Escaping from predators by burying his head in the sand was a good summary of how he lived before meeting the Oracle. Had he changed already? No, not really. Such profound personality changes took a considerable amount of time and awareness. Nevertheless, the Oracle deserved some credit. A full-time program like his had the same effect on him as good behavioral therapy. Of the many skills he had acquired, the majority were actually related to the various functional movements he had practiced during his training. Jumping, footwork, boxing, dodging, all kinds of acrobatics, and finally all kinds of survival skills. They included lighting a campfire, recognizing medicinal herbs and using them properly, getting water or food, making basic traps, and making clothing or leather from fur and skin. In addition to this, he also learned first aid, sewing, and even how to identify all kinds of materials. Even with an IQ now close to 145, this was not a task that could be accomplished in such a short period of time. After 3 weeks, the skills he had been practicing looked something like this: knowledge and skill masteries, rational thinking and common sense. 100 points, normal human. 10. Most people think they are always right or full of common sense, but how many of them actually act sensibly? You've always been a logical person. No absurd beliefs or superstitions cloud your judgment, and you are open-minded. By overcoming your procrastinating instincts, you have brought the common sense you have neglected to the forefront. Note, however, that it was fear that led you to go against your true nature. Without it, or in the face of stronger stimulation, you could fall back into your old ways. Informatics, 76 points, normal human, 8 points. You're not at the novice level anymore. Cyber engineering, 51 points, normal human, 1 point. You are not a novice anymore. Communication, 5 points, plus 1 chap 16. Normal human, 10 points. Being solitary for too long given birth to social anxiousness. You can barely talk with your workmates and clients. Your body language and word choices rarely convey your true intention. You also don't have the confidence nor the oral skills needed to perform a public speech or holding a conference. Acrobatics, 68 points, normal human, 10 points. You could only do a backflip, but you added some new strings to your bow. With good coordination and balance, you can now quickly adapt your movements to most situations. Gymnastics competitions are a long way off, but at least you don't look like a potato when you roll. Fighting, 16, plus 9, points, normal people, 5 points. You have a ferocious side inside you. You don't play by the rules. Should a hypothetical fight break out, the groin, throat, and eyes would be your instinctive targets. You're not courageous, but don't have any fleeing instinct. All those gestures you've been practicing recently have given you a good foundation. You still don't know anything about martial arts, but no one can say you can't throw a punch. Cooking, 21, plus 20, points, normal human, 4 points. Cooking morning, noon, and evening real gourmet meals worthy of the name have allowed your talent as a cook to shine through. Your understanding is still rudimentary, but at least you've stopped using your microwave. A small step for man, but a big step for you. Survival, 34, normal human. 0 to 2 points. It would be arrogant of you to think that you can survive a naked winter in Siberia, but at least you won't risk foolishly poisoning yourself by eating the wrong berry. If the environment is not too hostile and you have a solution, you will be able to grasp it. He had many other skills, but they were not significant enough to be mentioned or were included in the calculation of the level of mastery of the above skills. Everything was going well. So why Jake had to face reality so hard? A simple truth. Contrary to video games, in real life you could lose your stats and skill levels. That is what happened to Jake. One morning, he just decided to have a well-deserved day off. On that day, he didn't train, didn't cook, didn't learn nor review anything as he should have. The day after, he discovered the appalling truth. His attributes and skills had regressed. Not much, but he had lost 0.1 point of intelligence and 1 or 2 points in most of his knowledge-dependent skills. His procrastinating instincts then returned to full power. The common sense that had enabled him to stay on course collapsed, giving way to a deep despondency. After 3 weeks of relentless training, he had long since forgotten that mysterious mouse. The fear that was supposed to drive him into action, forgotten. He returned to his original lazy, indolent self. What Jake didn't know, however, was that the rest of the world, which he had ignored throughout his ordeal, was no better off than he was. There was a common trait found in most intelligent people. A lot of thinking, little action. Blessed are the simple-minded was not a saying that just happened to exist. There was obviously a basis for this claim. People who were a little bit dumber than average, or sometimes just men of action, were naturally less concerned about the implications behind their actions. They did not ask themselves the question, am I wasting my time? Or how many others have failed before me? They were content to take action, letting themselves be carried along by the flow. The procrastinators were all, without exception, great thinkers. It took a minimum of intelligence to constantly question the meaning of one's objectives, to put them into perspective and then to ignore them. Most of them were lunatics planning complex plans to achieve their goals, often also quite perfectionist. Yet, when the time came to take action for good, these people deflated, finding all sorts of excuses. There were two simple reasons for this. The fear of failure, which was logically proportional to the immensity of the task at hand, and the feeling of futility, which could be summed up by the question, what's the point? Jake was suffering from the second case. If you fed your imagination of invincible superheroes, completely overpowered protagonists becoming stronger and faster by applying simple precepts like no pain, no gain, you were doomed to despair. Add to that an outlet in the form of video games and free web novels and you ended up with someone like Jake. A person that nothing could motivate because after all it wasn't worth it. I thought that if there was a path, it meant that the rewards were earned for good. Why did my stats drop after a simple day of rest? Jake complained like a cranky kid whose lollipop had just been snatched. Are you serious? She growled with undisguised disdain. Could you tell me in detail the recipe for the first stew the path made you cook? Jake gasped. Realizing the uncertainty he'd chosen to ignore all along was now being thrown back in his face. How could I? It's been 3 weeks. I've been cooking non-stop, cramming all kinds of boring stuff, without ever once having a moment for myself. Of course, I forgot. I vaguely remember a few steps like chopping onions or meat, but most stews tend to look the same anyway. The proportions of spices, the exact sequence, I have no idea. As you said, you have forgotten. You're only human after all. She reminded him in a sympathetic voice. Naturally, this is reflected in your statistics. Or maybe you were hoping the Oracle would take pity on you and inflate your levels of knowledge to clear your conscience. Jake sensed a headache coming. For fuck's sake, he had an IQ over 140, not 40. Of course, he had thought about that. But what was he supposed to do about it? Give up even before he started? He could be stupid sometimes, but he wasn't so senile yet that he forgot the world was going to hell. Is it possible to at least retain what I've learned? Not wasting weeks of effort in a matter of days? Jake wondered aloud. Sure, it can be done. You forget because your brain's memory capacity is limited, as is your attention span. She explained in a bored tone. A glimmer of hope lit up Jake's eyes. Thank you, Sherlock. Then how many points of intelligence would I need to not forget anything? That's a harder question than it sounds. The intelligence shown on your status is calculated by including many cognitive functions. Memory is only one of those variables. The formula is not that simple. If the amount of information you can retain doubles, your intelligence can double as well in practice, if your thinking ability follows. However, if your reaction speed doubles, your intelligence won't necessarily double in this case. Take the example of a cat. No matter how long it tries to capture the red light of a laser, it will never understand that the light source comes from somewhere else. A faster brain wouldn't make any difference. That's a fundamental limitation. A better memory, on the other hand, might help him realize that something is wrong. Or at least, if it does, the cat will remember it. Please, just give me a number. Jake begged, vainly hoping to be spared from another lecture. If I consider that your brain is evolving uniformly, I'd say at least 200 points. You'll still forget over time because the brain has limited storage capacity, but it will be negligible. Jake was stunned. 200 points meant so much intelligence that the world's greatest geniuses would look like a bunch of retards. That equated to an IQ of 2000. Considering his cognitive faculties were in balance, it was terrifying. His memory would be 20 times better by default, but so would his concentration and understanding. In reality, this would translate into a much higher learning capacity than that number. Fuck, is that even possible? Checking for paths to become invincible or dominate the universe, that was the first thing I did. And the answer?
Nothing, nada, niet.
Jake became enraged by this underhanded move from she. Authority insufficient, she responded with the same casual tone. But to his surprise, it was that hated response that calmed Jake. He had just become aware of an absurdity in the Oracle's workings. When I make irrational wishes like developing superhuman intelligence, no path is generated. Instead, if I ask she sends me back to my insufficient level of authority. Where's the catch? That was the crux of the matter. He'd already seen firsthand that the oracle wasn't infallible. There was at least one wild mouse laughing in its face. So, was the absence of paths really a sign that it was impossible? Not necessarily. There was still the possibility that the paths were not presented to him, as they were considered impossible or fatal. The paths I am thinking of, do they exist or am I wasting my time? He asked one last time just to confirm it once and for all. Raise the rank of your oracle and I might be able to give you some answers. But remember that sometimes ignorance is a bliss. She had literally just admitted that he wasn't just deluding himself so he could regain some semblance of hope. The depression that had gripped Jake that day, and was on the verge of making him fall back into his old vices, was gone. He now had only one goal, to raise the damn experience gauge to 100% in order to increase his rank, which was still 0 to rank 1. Only then could he start planning his future. So his first good idea was to get back to work. Jake had long noticed that the oracle was rewarding him with a fraction of the experience needed each time he reached a milestone in the pursuit of his paths. The only downside was that reaching the next rank required finishing almost all the paths in progress. Going to the end of the path based on physical training could not be done in less than 6 months. If he decided to cram all day long, he could probably learn the rest of the books on the list in a few weeks. Unfortunately, 40 plus 30% was only 70%. With the 5% he earned from having fun with Ruby, he was still 25% short. The only missions he had left out so far were those that were aimed at correcting his social skills and improving his charisma. Not because they were long or painful, but precisely because they forced him to make a type of effort that he found 1,000,000 times more awful than training in the gym. Nevertheless, the facts spoke for themselves. Jake could get the 30% in just a few days, provided he was willing to push back the limits of his embarrassment. Therefore, he decided it was finally time to go to that bloody hairdresser. It would be the first step to build the image of his brand new self. These 3 weeks of drastic training had, at least, the merit of completely changing his morphology. He hadn't lost much weight on the scale, but the fat had given way to muscles. Many might have thought of doping at the beginning of the 21st century, but with the technology of the 2100s it wasn't so shocking. It was still unbelievable, though. His mane of hair was longer and more tangled than ever, but at least physically, he now had a certain bearing. His skin was much clearer, his eyes were brighter, and his body was well-defined without looking massive. To be honest, he had never looked better. Oh, and there was one last detail. Jake was rich now. Instead of getting his money back after 3 days, as the path had recommended at first, he had instead taken the trouble to be patient and let his money grow. The result was what he had hoped for. The impact of a warp drive engine was far more impressive than he originally imagined. Investors all wanted a piece of the pie, and his stock price hit the roof in an instant. With his depressive episode over, Jake realized for the first time that he was a millionaire and a handsome young man with a bright future ahead of him. The sun was at its zenith, the afternoon having just begun. Jake may have wasted his morning wallowing, but now that he was on the right track, there was no turning back. He packed his gym clothes and sneakers, didn't forget to take his credit card and some cash, and went to the fitness center while doing his usual jog. His physical metamorphosis was palpable. The few kilometers he struggled to complete without spitting out his lungs were as grueling as ever, but it took him much less time to get to his fitness center. He also sweated much less and caught his breath more quickly. Jake was gradually becoming aware of the sidelong glances he was getting. New gym members saw him as a regular, while the regulars were amazed to find that his headless training had paid off. A few chicks that came to the gym to maintain their precious bodies were giving him teasing glances. Still as introverted as ever, he chose to look right through them, going straight to the barber shop. The latter was just one of a long list of stores that had found in this sports center an occasion to make a profit. Perfume shop, pharmacy, health food or clothing stores, no space was wasted. The shop window scene from the outside was somewhat standard, with photos of models with unlikely haircuts and some posters or display products to please the sponsors. Jake strode into the hair salon with a resolute look on his face. He was still sweating a little, but clearly the coach had not advised him to take a shower, so why bother? If it didn't earn him experience points, it probably wouldn't have any decisive impact whether he was clean or not. And indeed, it turned out to be irrelevant. Once inside, the hairdressing salon turned out to be rather spacious and well-lit. The equipment looked new, the leather armchairs and worktops were impeccable as well. There was only a couch and a few magazines to wait, though the salon turned out to be empty. Two middle-aged hairdressers were enjoying their moment of respite, chatting over a cup of coffee. These women had emaciated faces, clearly affected by the recent upheavals brought about by the alien ship. Some, like Jake, saw the arrival of the oracles as a blessing, while for others the bracelets only meant misfortune and misery. Their society had been turned upside down by these devices, revolutionizing their lifestyles. They had lost customers, the most demanding of them going directly to the professionals the oracle considered more competent. Including those who were terrified and confined within their own homes, these hairdressers had seen their salaries cut by more than half. When they heard the front door squeak, revealing a handsome young man with enough hair to give free rein to their creativity, they were all too ready to give it a go. Their greedy eyes sparkled with joy, like a hungry predator before a fat prey. Their first big catch since the beginning of the week. Jake, unaware of the excitement his arrival had just triggered, said a shy hello before sitting on the couch to await his turn. The youngest hairdresser, though not quite so fresh either, came up to him with a welcoming smile. Unfortunately, her yellow teeth ruined her good intentions, testifying to her smoking habits. When you had an idea of the price of a packet of cigarettes in the 22nd century, you could immediately understand her plight. "Hello, handsome. What can I do for you?" she said in a formal tone. Even her perfume reeked. Jake loved citrus like everyone else, but when that smell occurred in a public place, it reminded him more of toilet deodorant. "Hello. Well, you only have to look at the top of my head to know why I'm here. A functional cut will do the trick. A little length at the top, tapered at the sides." Jake hated going to the hairdresser, but that was precisely why he knew exactly what to ask for. He did not give a damn about current trends, nor the hairdresser's advice. "All right, will you follow me, sir?" she said, showing him the way. She took him to another section at the back of the barber shop, which was initially out of his sight. Other armchairs leaning against special sinks were lined up next to each other, with many mirrors on the opposite wall so that you could watch yourself shamefully get off on a complete stranger shampooing your hair. To his surprise, another customer was already waiting on one of the chairs, with the characteristic blank stare of a person communicating with his oracle AI. The hairdressers had left him in the lurch while they finished their gossip exchange. The real surprise, however, was that he recognized the person in question. It was Paul Baker, another of his co-workers. Having not come to work at the virtual reality arcade center, Jake hadn't seen him for almost a month. Paul was once the seducer of their gang of nerds. From his 190 centimeters height, he was the classic handsome dark-haired man who made the ladies fall in love with him. He had a charming smile and knew how to be helpful. Given that he was also a professional VR player, he was the perfect charismatic employee. Well, that was all in the past. The Paul Baker sitting in front of him was quite different. Unlike him, who had lost his cowardly physique, Paul had lost weight in an alarming way. The once robust fellow was now almost too scrawny for his own good. His eyes were sunken in their sockets, with large bags underneath showing how sleep-deprived he was. His hands grasping the arm of the armchair were trembling slightly, evidence of an excess of caffeine. "Paul? Is that you? What's happened to you?" asked Jake, shocked to see him so weakened. The young man turned his head towards him when he heard his voice, his eyes flashing suddenly. As he contemplated his former colleague's new appearance, he couldn't help but breathe a long sigh. "Hi, Jake. As you can see, I've had better days. I'm glad to see that things seem to be going well for you. I want you to know that our meeting here today is no accident. It was my oracle that led me here. Of course, I also needed to freshen up my hair, so I might as well kill two birds with one stone." Jake was well aware that he could be included in someone else's predictions. Still, it was confusing to be part of Paul's path. They may have been co-workers in the past, but they had never been friends. As a self-respecting, introverted nerd, he was running away like the plague from this kind of radiant individual. Apart from Harry, who was like him, and Camille, who was a hottie and his direct supervisor, he truly didn't give a damn about anyone else. Anyway, Jake had come in for a haircut, and he had no intention of changing his plan. So he slumped into one of the chairs to Paul's right, and could now watch his reflection in the mirror as much as he wanted. Meanwhile, the hairdressers had finished their coffee break and were ready to get to work. They put on a pair of latex gloves, pressed their heads against the sink and turned on the taps. Once the water was hot enough, they soaked the boys' hair and then brushed them with shampoo. To earn their rates, they massaged their scalps for longer than they should have, making them grunt with satisfaction. Even Paul seemed to relax. After that, the hairdressers moved them into the main workroom. Perhaps because they were relieved to have 2 clients at once, they showed great professionalism, showing all their expertise. Paradoxically, Paul, who was used to sophisticated and trendy cuts, asked for the same functional cut as Jake. His former colleague was like a stranger. During the entire performance, the 2 young men remained silent. When the hairdressers finished their task, a huge mass of hair was scattered on the tile floor, and he felt as if his head was lighter. Jake then paid his hairdresser, leaving a generous tip, and left with Paul on his heels. After that, Jake continued following his path as though nothing had happened. He did his training just like the other days, replicating the gestures of his shadow guide with absolute confidence. Paul, for his part, did not stop him. The handsome former boy watched him make all those strange movements with a thoughtful look, as if he was wondering about the difference between their respective ways of coping with all these turmoil. In the end, when Jake was drenched in sweat and totally out of energy, Paul finally made up his mind. "I'm having a party at my house tonight. I'd like you to come. Harry, Thru, and even Camille will be there." He revealed his true purpose, leaving Jake dubious. Given Paul's condition, he clearly didn't look like he was in the mood. Besides, he and Harry had never been invited to any of his previous parties. What was different this time? "Sorry, mission party at Paul Baker's house. Potential rewards: learning about the mouse, meeting people, seducing Camille. Communication skills +1, self-confidence +1. Level of authority +5%. Coaching had just decided otherwise. "What is it, Jake? Something's come up?" checked Paul, slightly worried. "No, everything's fine. Okay, for tonight I'll be there." With those words, they parted. This proposal was unexpected, but it had the merit of aligning with his plans. After all, what better way to improve social skills than with a party? Jake brooded for a long time over the reasons behind Paul's invitation. He had always been inclined to party, but a little voice in his head was whispering to him that things would be quite different this time. Jake decided to take it easy for the rest of the afternoon. He didn't have enough time anyway to accomplish anything substantial. For the first time in several weeks, he turned on his TV. Completely obsessed with his path, he hadn't paid the slightest attention to his surroundings. He knew that the world was going badly. After all, he was ardently following this path for this very reason. Letting himself be distracted by some news, a lot of alarmist ones at that, would not have done him any good. Jake wasn't fooled, though. After the first few days, when the streets were emptier than usual, they had become bustling again. However, it did not last. The alleyways were not empty. Many people kept on going to work or attending to their business. But there were some details that would catch the eye of a discerning eye. Like the game Spot the Difference, the situation might look the same at first glance, but when you really compared the details, the differences were striking. First of all, the silence. The birds stopped singing, the dogs stopped barking, the crickets and the cicadas also stopped chirping. If we pushed the paranoia even further, there were almost no insects. Temperatures were still warm in early September. Flies and mosquitoes should have been ruining his life. After all, he had sweet blood, or at least a smell they liked. However, this was not enough to conclude anything. It would no doubt fuel conspiracy theories, but there may have been more rational explanations that he didn't know about. But that wasn't the only strange thing. Small and large businesses were closing down one after the other. Large food stores were increasingly affected by stock shortages. It started with occasional delays in deliveries, especially of fresh fish, and then it spread to other foodstuffs. Now, meat, fish, fresh fruit, and vegetables were no longer supplied on a regular basis. Prices, which were already high, soared again. If Jake hadn't suddenly become an upstart, he would have been affected by all this. The key point was the rumor that something weird was going on in the provinces outside New Paris. No one really knew what was going on there. The poorest households were protesting in the streets, complaining that their income was no longer enough to cover their food needs. At the same time, everyone who had relatives in these remote areas reported being unable to reach them. Without exception, voicemail messages were immediately received as if the smartphones were turned off or cut off from the phone network. The government was not helping at all. Military personnel had been deployed in the heart of New Paris, allegedly to stop the riots and ensure the safety of its citizens. The problem was that they also controlled the entrances and exits of the city. Well, just the entrances, in fact. The highways were only congested in one direction. No one, except for a few heavily guarded transport trucks, could enter the capital. Jake had neither news of his cousin nor his uncle, but unlike most of the people involved, he was not worried that much. Indeed, it was not uncommon for them to be out of town and unreachable for weeks at a time. His cousin Anya was working for the government anyway and probably knew a lot more about the situation than he did. Even though she would be subject to professional secrecy, he was convinced that, in the event of real trouble, she would not leave him in the dark and would bring him up to date. As for his uncle Kalen, he had been radio silent since Jake had tipped him off about the various anomalies he had noticed. Asserting that he did not think about it would be a lie, but moping would be an equally noxious mistake. He had almost forgotten about the stray cat-eating mouse. The memory trotted in one corner of his head, but over time it had become blurry, less frightening. The fact that he had never again encountered such rodents also had a part to play in this. On the flat screen, a report was discussing the net increase in criminal activity since the arrival of the oracles. Serial murder and petty theft of all kinds had multiplied like a roach colony in the air ducts of an unsanitary housing project. Despite the fact that the police could easily find the culprits with the help of their oracles, many crimes were committed every day. The reason for this was obvious. The rush of adrenaline that accompanied taking a risk combined with the satisfaction of fulfilling a coach's mission. A serial killer was probably receiving all-day-long challenge missions to carry out more and more sophisticated crimes, or with increasingly strict conditions. Some paths might even allow to escape all suspicion, or have innocent people charged, regardless of the existence of the oracles to refute these false accusations. Moreover, the experience given by the oracles to increase the authority level was proportional to the difficulty of the paths achieved. Some of these fugitives still at large may have already promoted their rank to the next level. Jake turned off the television when the report advised every citizen to stay home after nightfall. It sounded dangerously like a curfew. When it was finally past 7 p.m., Jake began to get ready. He put on a simple white shirt, stretchy black pants, and a pair of suede shoes, no less comfortable than his sneakers. His clothing style lacked any extravagance, remaining functional and comfortable. His idle instincts having a hard life, he made do with an old-fashioned comb-over. He inspected himself in the mirror for a brief moment, a contented smirk on his face, before setting off on his walk. Crunch ignored him all along, taking a deep nap. The former homeless cat had gained weight and was now living his pasha life with gusto. It was the first time he had ever been to Paul's house. His parents were among the fortunate few who owned an old villa prior to the construction of New Paris. It was originally an old cottage lost in the middle of nowhere, but after the site was chosen to become the new capital, it became a popular piece of real estate. Refusing to sell, the old residence had remained the same throughout the years, sticking out like a sore thumb among all the skyscrapers in the city center. Besides being located in the heart of the business district with all amenities nearby, the police station was in the same street, ensuring optimal security. The other good thing was that it was less than 20 minutes walk away. The red sun was fading away on the horizon, giving way to night when Jake reached his destination. A high gate and an intimidating wrought iron fence isolated the house from ordinary people. Jake rang the intercom to announce himself. Seconds later, the gate opened with a shrill squeak that made his ears bleed. A little lubricant to smooth out the joints would have been nice. A short paved road and a fallow garden separated him from the mansion. As he walked those few meters, he noticed a doghouse, but no dog was nearby. As night fell, the old stone cottage looked like a haunted house. Fortunately, the atmosphere changed completely when he walked through the front door. A piece of deafening pop electro music immediately assaulted his eardrums. Multicolored strobe lights really gave the feeling of entering a nightclub. "Hey, Jake, you came. I can't believe it." Harry, sipping his beer near the lobby, was thrilled to see him. Before his arrival, he was chatting with two other men. Paul Baker, the owner of the house, and through Abimbala, another of his co-workers. Both greeted him in turn. Paul, whom he had met earlier, only nodded his head. Through, for his part, shook his hand with a strong grip. The smell of musky spice immediately attacked his nostrils. Or in fact, it did not. Through Abimbala was a tall black man, 1.9 meters tall, obese, and his skin was constantly oily and oozing with sweat. He was the fruit of a hazardous union, an Ethiopian father and an Indian mother. He had inherited his father's skin color and his mother's straight hair. His parents ran a restaurant mixing their two cultures, which together with his poor body hygiene gave him an exotic body odor to keep it poetic. He wasn't a social nerd like them, quite the opposite. However, he had a peculiar character, manifested by a self-confidence that was absolutely disproportionate to what reality would suggest. Nevertheless, life was full of surprises. Tonight, Through smelled good. He was well-dressed, had his hair done, and had even lost 7 or 8 kilos since the last time they had seen each other. He was still obese, but it was still an incredible transformation, worthy of praise. All in all, and unlike Paul, Through was another of those people to whom the Oracle had given wings. Although Through's physical transformation was impressive, it wasn't enough to destabilize Jake, since after all, he didn't care about almost anything. However, if someone claimed that the Oracle had no hand in it, he would refuse to believe it. After the reunion, the group of friends joined the rest of the guests, beginning a new series of introductions. Camille Els, his superior, was also present. A tight black evening gown had replaced her usual suit, giving her a much more sexy and comely look. Dressed like this, she looked more approachable, less haughty, as if the distance between the boss and his employees had disappeared. Besides Camille, there were about 20 people he didn't know, all of them Paul's friends or acquaintances. One only had to look at these guests to realize how they looked out of place in comparison. The girls were all gorgeous, dressed like models posing for a parade, while the men were elegant and athletic. Their trendy clothes, plus the few luxury brands he recognized, reflected their affluent social backgrounds. All these people were chatting among themselves as if they had all known each other for a while. They were probably all longtime friends of Paul's, sharing the same hobbies. The fact that Camille was invited was not a surprise in itself. She was hot after all and in the same age bracket as them. That Paul took the initiative to invite Through Harry and him was a real surprise, though. Before today, their relationship had been limited to work, remaining cordial at best, at worst with barely concealed contempt. "Paul, present your friends to me." A tall man over 2 meters tall, with an Afro-American physique, embraced him with a friendly smile. At first, he seemed nice and enthusiastic about making new friends. However, even someone as uncommunicative as Jake could notice his fleeting glance at Camille's cleavage. Men all the same. Jake sighed with deep contempt. "You know you're a man too," she retorted in an exasperated tone. Naturally, Jake wisely chose to ignore her. Any man other than him obviously wasn't him. Even if he was the one squinting at Camille's cleavage, it would be excusable. With this kind of wobbly mentality, he could practically justify every one of his actions and freely criticize others without ever suffering a case of conscience. The 2M Giants initiative allowed Paul to introduce them to the rest of his friends. Their interactions were polite and some banalities were exchanged. Nevertheless, one could sense in their attitude that they were wondering since when Paul had been associating with this kind of individuals. Of course, they kept their opinions to themselves. Even among the bourgeoisie of New Paris, owning a big house like this one was not so easy. There were, however, 3 people in this group who stood out for their gloomy faces. Like Paul, they were pale and emaciated, and seemed to have lost a lot of weight in a short time. The first was a young Afro-American boy with dreadlocks about 1.8 meters tall, named Kanye, who was the younger brother of the 2-meter-tall giant who first approached them. The other 2 were a pair of petite-looking twins named Elisa and Sarah. They had a tan skin typical of Middle Eastern countries, but their hair was a Venetian blonde. They remained rather pretty, but their deep dark circles made them look sickly and not very reassuring. Of course, if the primary intention of the evening was indeed to have fun and get drunk, it hid another purpose. After the group had begun warming up to each other over a few drinks and appetizers, Paul Baker waved his head at Jake indicating that he should follow him to another room. Kanye, Elisa and Sarah accompanied the duo, claiming they wanted to help in the kitchen. Paul had actually planned it, putting pizzas in the oven, which gave him the perfect alibi to isolate himself for a while. Once in the kitchen, Paul closed the latch, then turned to Jake with a serious expression. "First of all, Jake, I want you to know that I know for a fact that you don't like me and that you don't care what happens to me." He began by making it clear what his true intentions were. "The reason I invited you here tonight is that I'm following a path. Now, let me tell you what I've been going through in the last month so you can understand why the 4 of us are in this mess." Kanye, Sarah and Elisa all had anxious faces and were shaking slightly. It was subtle, but Jake's trained eye didn't miss this detail. What they had endured to end up in such a state was a mystery that he had to solve. It began a month ago, a week before the alien ship arrived. To put things in context, none of us were in New Paris when the oracles appeared. We were on vacation in the Alps, planning to go camping and hiking in the mountains. It was sunny, it was hot, the weather was perfect for that. Our first 3 days of camping went well. We tested the mountain restaurants, we bathed in the lake after a good day's walk. Everything turned into a nightmare from the 4th day on. We got lost. Lost? Jake couldn't understand how anyone could get lost in the 22nd century. 13G was accessible everywhere on the planet except perhaps if you were living underground under a thick layer of heavy metals. Paul and his 3 friends all sighed at the same time. Their restless expressions showed that just remembering the events made them relive that nightmare. "We've really gotten lost," Paul replied. "But it wasn't our fault." Sarah intervened, anxious to justify herself. Jake could tell the twins apart because Elisa had a mole under her right eye. "True, but at the time we didn't know that," added Kanye, who was the youngest of the group, only 18 years old. "Anyway, we were pretty lost," said Paul, continuing his story. "We decided to camp out under the stars and we got drunk. Still, it wasn't our first night camping, and we thought we knew where we were. Except that the next day on waking, we no longer recognized the landscape around us. We remembered a waterfall not far away, which we couldn't find again, and some rocks with painted signs that were supposed to serve as landmarks for the hikers. On top of that, we had barely left the trail when we pitched our tents. Of course, there was no network, which was supposed to be impossible. The next 3 days were an ordeal. We wandered up and down the mountain among the fir trees and brush, not finding our way back. We had supplies, but not enough, so it quickly became complicated. Sometimes we'd find a signpost indicating the right road, but we'd end up at dead ends when we followed it. It was the arrival of the oracles that unblocked the situation. When the drones appeared out of nowhere like a cloud of bugs covering the sky, we panicked and tried to escape. As you can imagine, we got caught. The 4 companions showed their bracelets as proof. At first, we were pretty excited. We wanted to go home, and the oracles gave us a path to follow. We thought the path would lead us to our car, and then we'd go home safely with it. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out as we had hoped. We walked for days, at first through the mountains and woods. Then one day we reached a good old asphalt road. We all cried that day. After that, we finally reached a small town where we rented a car and we were able to go back to New Paris. I mean, we should have. We had the same problem as when we were at the campsite. We got lost again. The roads led nowhere, stopping in front of rivers or cliffs. The traffic signs didn't match the cities we were stopping at. A real ordeal. By following the path, we were still getting closer to the goal, and the AIs on our bracelets were adamant, reminding us over and over again that the oracle could not be wrong. Seeing the town sign of a city we knew gave us hope, knowing that we were on the right path. This last week was the worst for us. Just so you know, we only made it to New Paris a few days ago. Jake was speechless. Their story looked straight out of a bad science fiction novel. Are you telling me that, aside from the first few days of hiking, you all spent almost 3 weeks driving to New Paris? How's that even possible? He couldn't help doubting them. It seemed too absurd. Not only is it true, but there are far worse things. We finally understood why we got lost when we started getting paranoid. By not closing our eyes, we ended up witnessing a disturbing scene, to say the least. We noticed that our landmarks were moving away from us, if not disappearing completely. It was really discreet, the kind of difference you only notice after several hours. When we did notice it, though, it was all we could see. The Oracle Overseer tricked me. They knew all along. She commented with a chilling voice, halfway between despair and anger. What do you mean, he fooled you? Jake worried. Remember when I told you I hid the fact that the mouse didn't appear in your paths? Of course. It was supposed to be impossible, but you chose not to pass on this information to supposedly buy me some time. Jake repeated, still frustrated that he didn't know why. Well, it didn't do any good. According to your friend Paul's speech, what I wanted to prevent began before the oracles even arrived. Revealed she in a sinister tone. You mean to say that from the first time you reported the existence of this mouse, the Oracle Overseer was lying when he said the proof was insufficient? Exactly. And I still can't tell you why this is bad news until you raise your level of authority. While Jake and his AI were mentally chatting, Paul and his 3 friends paused, waiting for his blank stare to refocus on them. When Jake finished his mental conversation, Paul resumed his story. So, as I said, the landmarks we chose were moving. Simply put, our environment was changing all the time, but too slowly for us to notice. At least at first. We finally figured out why the Oracle was making us take all these weird, crazy detours. Basically, all the detours were just to get us back on the normal road. We soon realized that every time our route was abnormally blocked, it meant unknown territory. Unknown territory? Jake frowned. Indeed. There's one thing I can vouch for after all we've been through. Every time we ventured into one of these lands, not by choice of course, but because the path demanded it, we left France. Wait, I need to make one thing clear. Jake stopped him, this time in complete bewilderment. If the phenomenon you describe is true, any satellite should have observed it. Or at least there's no way the government doesn't know about it. The group of friends laughed hoarsely, but their eyes did not smile. Jake could only read frustration and anguish on their faces. Of course they know, confirmed Paul. But the situation is more complicated than it seems. You have no idea the interrogation we were subjected to by the military in order to get back to New Paris. We told them the same story we told you, but they weren't surprised or shocked. They just made us sign a contract that we would keep it secret, and one of the generals even answered some of our questions. Wait a minute. That's it? Jake interrupted him again. They let you in based on your good faith? Seems unthinkable to me. The easiest way to keep it a secret would have been to keep you quarantined outside the city. They could have, and they did in the beginning. Paul explained patiently. But that's no use now. What we went through is happening in New Paris right now. Jake pondered over the weight of those words and their implications. He hadn't noticed anything, but aside from practicing and staying home, he hadn't been interested in anything else. Do you mean that New Paris is losing pieces, or that some strange territories are appearing in the middle of the city? More or less, but the phenomenon is progressing much more slowly. Paul, tell him about the other problems we encountered before returning to New Paris. Reminded Kanye. Roads cut in half and unknown lands were scary, but never dangerous. Elisa and Sarah, the twins, shivered when he mentioned this detail. Clearly, They were not willing to relive this traumatic experience. Yeah, we got in trouble. First, it was nothing bad. It was scary, but it was still within the realm of possibility. We ran into a bear on our hike that totally ignored us, and then a female boar charged us a few days later. We had no luck, but we never thought anything was wrong. It was only afterwards that it got worse. About a week after the oracles arrived, we came across our first nightmare. We came across a wolf carcass split in two on the roadside. We thought of all kinds of possibilities like getting run over or being attacked by a bear, but it didn't look like that. Anyway, we got the hell out of there. The second weirdness was when we tried to fill up the gas tank. With the environment making no sense, we were in constant fear of running out of gas. We'd fill up at any station that we saw. In the beginning, everything was normal. The small towns or villages where we stopped were normally inhabited, often with a gas station attendant present to greet us when we filled up. Unfortunately, that didn't last. To be frank, during the last week we spent on the roads, all the villages we stopped in were deserted. Not a living soul for miles around. We even came across a small town that was missing half of its buildings. The last few days we literally didn't run into anyone. We really thought for a while that we were the last human beings left alive. Luckily, we ran into an army-escorted transport truck and followed them all the way to New Paris. There are still two more things to tell you. The first is that, as with the ghost towns, there were no more animals towards the end. No insects, no birds, nothing. Oh, we did come across a few beasts, but we all decided it was best to stay as far away from those horrors as possible. Let me guess, suggested Jake, falsely enthusiastic. Animals that look normal, but have translucent skin, creepy air, abnormal strength and ferocity, and no oracle on their paw? Paul, Kanye, and the twins stared at him in amazement. Did you see them too? Elisa exclaimed, glad she had not gone insane. Yes, a mouse as big as a rat that devoured two stray cats right in front of me. Oh my gods. Sarah and Kanye were livid when they heard that. They had done so well to stay away from those creatures. If a mouse can do that, it explains a lot. Paul replied, it wasn't a mouse we saw, it was a chihuahua. It may seem funny at first, but when it's the only living thing in a ghost town, it feels completely different. It was devouring the corpse of a Saint Bernard Mastiff. Speaking of dogs, did you maybe notice the empty doghouse in front of my parents' house? Indeed, Jake nodded, remembering the doghouse in the middle of the fallow garden. Without knowing why, the garden had left an austere and gloomy impression on him. Well, my dog's dead, announced Paul with an unexpected coldness. Apparently, a few days before we came home, the dog started barking like crazy in the middle of the night. My parents ignored it at first, but then it stopped and they went back to sleep. In the morning, they found half a paw in front of his kennel. For the record, my dog was a well-trained German Shepherd dog, the perfect guard dog, and the gate was closed. My parents thought it was a crime and reported it to the police, but to naught. Even they didn't really believe it. Even if Jake was twice as dumb, he wouldn't believe that one of those damn mutant bugs had nothing to do with it. The image of the dismembered cat being dragged in the dark was still vivid in his memory. And the last thing you wanted to tell me? Jake asked, preferring to refocus the conversation on the main topic. The latest scoop, this is a piece of information we managed to scrape together from the general who interrogated us. You see, even though we realized that pieces of roads or cities were disappearing, we unconsciously thought that somehow the planet was growing. Well, it's the opposite. The Earth is shrinking, and very rapidly at that. Or rather, it's slowly being transported away. Jake was stunned after Paul's speech. The Earth was shrinking at this very moment and he hadn't noticed anything all this time. According to him, his planet wasn't really disappearing but was actually being absorbed or transported somewhere else. The problem was that if it was just the Earth being transported, there would have been some pretty obvious anomalies like the disappearance of the moon or the sun, perhaps a change in the constellations. None of that occurred. However, according to the story of Paul and his friends, some places on Earth were being replaced by lands that were far too strange to exist on their planet. This meant at least one thing. It didn't make any sense. Even if the Earth was connected to parallel worlds or different spaces were superimposed on top of each other, the result should be much more chaotic. Jake's feeling was that the earth was gradually shattering into pieces like you would smash a puzzle into thousands of fragments. These pieces of land were then randomly recombined with other pieces belonging to other worlds. There was no evidence to support his theory, but without knowing the reason, he was almost convinced that his instincts were right. This kind of visceral certainty was not something he could ignore so easily. Between the disappearing animals, and more recently the humans in small towns and villages, there was plenty of room for paranoia. Even if there were strange monsters like that terrifying mouse or that cannibal chihuahua, the truth was that there weren't that many of them. The first sociopath or serial killer that would came along was probably killing more than these mutated animals. If pieces of Earth could disappear like that, transporting humans should be even simpler. Since he had discovered the existence of the Oracle devices, he found this hypothesis more than plausible. Paul, I appreciate you revealing all this to me. I really do. Jake thanked him from the bottom of his heart. But it still doesn't explain why. What do you have to gain by telling me all this? This time, even his own friends looked at Paul curiously. Kanye, Elisa, and Sarah trusted him, but it was the first time the trio met Jake. Paul had described Jake as a very ordinary employee, whom he barely knew by name. Yet their first impression of him was very different. About 6 feet tall, rather good-looking, with sharp muscles. He had a strange way of expressing himself, rarely smiled and showed little emotion. But other than that, he was rather calm and took them much more seriously than they had initially hoped. As I told you earlier, you are in one of my paths, Paul explained embarrassedly. When I came back to New Paris, I couldn't sleep for the first 2 days because I was so tense. I was so afraid of dying or being kidnapped in my sleep that I had become completely insomniac. At some point, I made a wish to survive this end of the world. I understood right away when I saw you practicing in the room that your oracle had given you a similar path. The only difference is that mine wanted me to meet you beforehand and tell you all of this. You mean to tell me that according to your oracle, inviting me tonight and revealing all this information directly increases your chances of surviving what's coming next? Jake summarized, unable to fathom the logic behind this plan. Apparently, but don't ask me why, I haven't the faintest idea. So many possibilities. Indeed, there were many possibilities that could justify this meeting. Just going to Paul's house could have a decisive impact. These revelations could help him to alter his plans, or they could just blow away the flames of his fear, preventing him from relaxing and falling back into his customary laziness. After this revelation, the quartet returned to the living room, carrying with them the much-awaited pizzas. They tried to have fun and enjoy the party with everyone as if nothing happened. Jake had lost his interest in that party and was barely able to look the part, falsely chuckling at Harry and Thru's jokes. Maybe to forget his anxieties or to do like everyone else, he started to drink more and more. At first, the atmosphere remained reserved and friendly. Then as the evening progressed, beers and wines were replaced by shots and cocktails of strong alcohol, such as tequilas or mojitos. When Jake's blood alcohol level exceeded a certain threshold, he finally began to disinhibit and relax, suddenly becoming much more expressive and cheerful. He then decided to return to his original plan while he was still sober enough to do the living missions to improve his communication skills. The missions were nonsensical, simply challenging his comfort zone. Unfortunately, he could not choose his missions. He had to fulfill the conditions of one challenge in order to discover the next one. Mission: hold eye contact with one of the present girls for at least 10 seconds, then wink at her teasingly. Oh crap, I don't think I've had enough to drink yet, panicked Jake, instantly pouring himself a shot of vodka to give himself some courage. Half an hour later, and after 3, maybe 4 more shots, Jake was finally tipsy, with a renewed courage that only alcohol had the secret. Okay, here we go. Not caring at all about the consequences, he finally began to reason like the rational egoist he had always been. He probably wouldn't see any of these people again, so why bother with the consequences? Jake scanned each of the guests, trying to catch the attention, even briefly, of one of the women nearby. Miraculously, Camille was looking in his direction. Before he even realized that he knew this person and that she was his superior, he had already stared at her for more than 5 seconds. To his great misfortune, Camille maintained eye contact, seeming to be amused by his reaction. Unless she wasn't looking at Jake, but at someone or something behind him. Holy shit, she just smiled back at him. Either way, the alcohol was going to his head, and considering Camille's flushed face, she wasn't much sober either. Mission: hold eye contact with one of the girls present for at least 10 seconds, and then wink at her teasingly. Mission accomplished. Perfect rating. Authority level, +1%. Without even realizing it, he had accomplished his mission. Jake became aware that he had unconsciously followed a path to properly time his wink and attitude. It seemed that, by being more alcoholic than usual, his spontaneity in using the oracle had increased. Encouraged by this first success, he started the second mission. Mission: engage in conversation with Camille with an original compliment that she would be proud of, but not used to hearing. Jake drew a deep breath. Between holding her eyes and complimenting her directly, there was a chasm that his shyness couldn't cross. He drank another shot, then poured himself another drink before taking his courage in both hands and accosting Camille. To his great despair, Camille hadn't stopped staring at him, watching his strange quirks. As he walked towards her, all of his neurons were working at the same time in search of the perfect opener. Alas, his usual cleverness seemed to have deserted him. Desperate, he decided to continue with his oracle, mimicking his shadow guide once again. "How are you doing, Camille? We never took the time to really talk. I wanted to apologize for leaving work so abruptly. I guess it hasn't been easy to replace me." Jake began, in a cordial tone, and ran his hand through his hair with an awkward look on his face that made him seem troubled. "Don't worry about it. At first, with only Harry to run the center, it was complicated, but after a week no one came in, so we closed the shop." Camille relieved him of his guilt with an encouraging smile. "Thank God. I was afraid you were angry with me." No, don't worry about it. I'm not the type to hold a grudge for so little. Anyway, I just wanted to say that your curly hair looks great today. Combined with the dress you chose, you look lovely." Jake finally managed to reach his target. Mission: engage in conversation with Camille with an original compliment that she would be proud of, but not used to hearing. Mission accomplished. Perfect rating. Authority level, +1%. One more mission accomplished. It was time to move on to third base. "Thank you, Jake. You have no idea how good it makes me feel to hear that. I spent so much time curling them up. I didn't think anyone would notice. I'm not very good at finding the right words, but I've always been attentive to the details that nobody pays attention to. You can get a lot of information just by looking at people." Jake boasted with an embarrassed smile. "Really? If I point out this person, what do you guess from their appearance?" Camille decided to test him at his own game, showing him Kanye's older brother, who had broken the ice with them earlier that evening. With his looks and clothes, he's... After that, Jake continued to chat with Camille, taking on missions that were increasingly difficult for an introvert like him. When the difficulty became too great, such as when he had to invite her to dance or pull something out of her hair, he would use it as an excuse to go back for a drink. Camille drank with him, and without realizing it, they became closer and closer. The problem was that as his level of drunkenness increased, he began to diverge more and more from the paths he was supposed to follow. With the help of alcohol, he found ideas of his own to satisfy the conditions of his missions, but he also increasingly revealed his true nature, an unfiltered cynicism and black humor. This did not displease Camille, entranced by his new personality. She realized for the first time that Jake, the least cooperative employee in her VR center, was in fact an exciting person to listen to with a personality full of nuances. Then finally came the fateful mission: kiss Camille. At this point in the evening, it wasn't even midnight. Jake was so drunk that he couldn't even tell his right from his left. He was totally freewheeling. Unfortunately, that didn't stop him from having an adrenaline rush, his heart pounding. For the umpteenth time, he excused himself and ran to the toilet to empty his bladder. A few people were waiting their turn before him, so he waited. Meanwhile, the previous drinks were still taking effect. When he finally came out of the toilet, he had completely forgotten about Camille and fell asleep on one of the sofas like a drunk homeless man on a sidewalk. When he woke up a few hours later, he was sober and feeling better. Dazed, the memories of his exploits with Camille came back to him and he started to panic, looking for her. A part like him had drunk too much and had gone to bed in the guest rooms. The others were still dancing or chatting over a drink. A few seconds later, he finally found Camille, and with her through. They were intertwined and glued together on the dance floor like two octopuses giving each other mouth to mouth. At that moment, Jake threw up.